Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the bleak, bone-chilling world of post-Roman Britain, a place where winter doesn't just test your patience, it tests your will to live. This isn't your cosy ski lodge snowstorm or hot cocoa by the fireplace. This is mud, ice, and the kind of cold that gets inside your bones and just stays there. The Roman legions are long gone, roads are falling apart, and trade networks? Forget about them, you're pretty much on your own, with a handful of neighbours and a dangerously understocked barn. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now tell me, what city are you listening from, and what time is it? Midnight in Chicago, 9 PM in Glasgow? I want to know who else is suffering through this with us. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the kind of morning that makes your teeth ache before you even get out of bed. Except you're not in a bed. You're curled up on a pallet of straw under a roughly woven wool blanket that smells like the sheep it came from. Frost clings to the inside of the wooden walls, and your breath hangs in the air like mist. Outside, the wind is howling through the bare trees, rattling loose bits of thatch from your roof. You know it's cold when even the dog hasn't moved. He's curled up tight by the embers of last night's fire, his nose tucked beneath his tail. You envy him. It's somewhere around 500 AD. Maybe 510, but calendars aren't really a thing right now. You measure time in moon cycles and harvests. You're one of the survivors, part of a ragged little settlement that used to be part of a Roman villa town. The stones are still there, sticking up out of the earth like forgotten bones. But the roofs are gone and most of the walls have been repurposed for other things. What remains of civilization lies buried beneath a layer of cold mud and memory. Latin's faded from everyday speech. Roads are overgrown. Coins don't mean much anymore, but a sack of barley, that's currency. You sit up, wrap yourself in an extra cloak, and fumble for your boots, hardened leather, things stuffed with bits of fur and straw. You curse softly under your breath. They're damp, they're always damp. Winter here isn't just snow, it's wet, relentless, creeping cold. Your roof leaks. The hearth barely draws smoke anymore. And if you don't tend to the fire soon, you'll lose what little warmth remains. You shuffle toward the hearth. Someone's already been up. Probably old Bryn, the goatkeeper, and tossed on some peat. It smoulders quietly, filling the hut with a thick, earthy scent. There's barely any wood left, not unless you want to go into the forest again, and no one really wants that. Not unless they're desperate. Breakfast is predictable. Gruel, barley mash, thickened with a little goat milk if you're lucky. The bread's tough and flat, harder to chew now that the last of your upper molars gave out last spring. You chew slowly, not because you savour it, but because your body's trying to decide if it's food or insulation material. Outside, the snow has crusted over with a layer of ice. A red squirrel darts across the yard and you watch it with envy. He has food. He has a plan. You go out anyway, you have to. The animals need tending, the roof needs patching, and if you don't break the ice in the trough, the goats won't drink. The wind knifes through your cloak as you step into the frozen slop that used to be your garden. There's no scent in the air anymore, just cold, pure and dry. Even the chickens are quieter than usual. They huddle together in a corner of their pen, feathers fluffed, eyes half shut. Your fingers go numb within minutes. You pull them inside your sleeves and keep moving. That's the key in winter. Keep moving. Stillness is the enemy. Stillness lets the cold in, lets it settle in your joints, behind your ribs, beneath your tongue. You remember what happened to Era last year. She went to check on her father's grave one frosty morning and didn't come back. They found her stiff and curled like a sleeping cat just past the tree line. You head back inside, thankful for the smothered glow of the hearth. Someone's boiling water. That's a luxury. Hot water means you're still winning. Here's a fun little twist of irony. Your ancestors, before the Romans came, actually handled winter a bit better in some ways. They had tighter knit tribal networks, better knowledge of native plants, and fewer expectations of grain storage. But now, after centuries of Roman rule, your people have lost touch with some of that. You've inherited the ruins of Roman infrastructure without the skills to maintain it. Villas with broken hypercourse systems mock you with their silent, empty walls. You could be warm in there if you knew how to fix them, but you don't. No one does. And yet people persist. You help patch a neighbour's roof with sod and woven twigs. You share a smoked fish from a late autumn catch. You swap news. Someone saw a trader's wagon last week on the old Roman road. which means spring might not be so far off. That is, if it doesn't snow again, which it will. Of course it will. You think about leaving sometimes, heading south toward the coast, maybe finding passage to Gaul, but travel in winter is madness. Roads are gone, bridges collapsed, and besides, there's no guarantee things are any better across the sea. Word has it things are worse even. Plagues, raiders, famine. You're better off staying put, hugging the fire and hoping your smoked meat holds out another month. The scholarly debate? Oh, it's a lively one. Some historians argue that post-Roman Britain didn't experience a total societal collapse, that communities adapted, that local elites kept some semblance of order. Others say no, it was a sharp nosedive into chaos and isolation. The truth probably lies somewhere between. What you do know, from your cold toes and empty belly, is that survival isn't philosophical, it's immediate. Day by day, bite by bite. Outside, night creeps in fast. The sky turns a bruised purple and a soft flurry begins. You add another peat brick to the fire and lay down your cloak for another night of half sleep. You're alive, for now. The wind claws at the walls again, like it's looking for a way in. You close your eyes and whisper to no one. Just get me to spring. It's the next morning and your breath still fogs in front of your face before you even get both eyes open. Another night survived, but your body feels like it aged a decade in your sleep. If you can even call that sleep. You're stiff, sore, and already thinking about how to get more fuel for the fire. Winter in this place doesn't loosen its grip easily, but as you sit up and grope around for your boots, still wet, still cold, you can't help but think about how you even got into this mess in the first place. Not you specifically, but your people, the land, Britain. Once upon a time, this little slice of damp earth was part of the Roman Empire, not just a colony, an actual outpost of Rome's vision of civilization. There were heated bathhouses, paved roads, marketplaces, amphitheatres, taxes and governors. Your great-grandparents might have eaten olives, imported from places they couldn't even pronounce. Latin was spoken, or at least mumbled through official scrolls, and winters, while still brutal, came with systems in place to help people get through them. Grain stores, protected trade routes, central governance, and most importantly, structure. And then, just like that, the Romans left. Around 410 AD, they packed up their soldiers, their bureaucrats, their bathwater and said good luck. Barbarian invasions on the continent had them scrambling, and Britain, remote and expansive to maintain, was cut loose. The governors were gone, the garrisons emptied, and those fancy stone villas and Hippocaust-heated homes left to rot. Your ancestors, once promised a seat at the imperial table, now sat alone in the ruins of a system they didn't build and couldn't maintain. Imagine inheriting a palace you don't know how to repair, with no instructions, no tools, and no way to call tech support. You head outside again, stomping through half-frozen mud and glance over at the pile of crumbled stone near the river, a former Roman bathhouse, now home to rats, moss, and one particularly territorial goose. You don't go near it much. It reminds you of how far things have fallen. The bricks are still there, strong and clean under centuries of grime, but no one knows how to put them back together. The nearest thing to government now is the village elder, old Cadeon, who smells like fermented turnips and insists the old gods still speak to him in dreams. The irony is thick enough to cut with a bone knife. The very Roman structures that once made winters bearable, grain granaries, heated floors, sealed roofs, have outlasted the knowledge needed to use them. You've got the shell, but no yolk. Some people have tried adapting the ruins. One village north of you lives inside a crumbling Roman fort, plugging gaps with timber and door, building fires over shattered tiles. You visited once. It felt haunted. Food's tight again today. You find yourself gnawing on yesterday's barley cake, the corners gone hard as stone. You'd trade your soul for a Roman amphora of olive oil right now, or even just a sack of their hardy wheat. Funny how even in ruin, the Romans still show up in your thoughts, like ghosts of a more comfortable past. And here's the thing most people forget. The collapse wasn't a single explosion. It was slow, uneven, and patchy. Some areas held on longer than others. A few coastal towns maintained bits of trade, even echoing Roman customs and laws well into the 500s. Historians are still debating just how dark the Dark Ages actually were. Was it a complete cultural nosedive or just a shift, one system dissolving while another slowly took shape? The academic feud rages on, but you're not particularly interested in nuance when your roof leaks and your stomach growls. From where you're standing, ankle deep in icy muck, it sure feels dark. You think about your grandmother. She used to tell stories of how life used to be. Tales passed down about warm floors and hot baths. She described rooms where steam filled the air and people soaked together without freezing their bones. You thought she was making it up. Now you wonder if maybe she wasn't. Still, life moves on now. People adapt. You've patched your own shelter more times than you can count, layer after layer of thatched daub and hope. You learned how to shape clay into crude cups, how to twist nettles into twine, how to trap rabbits using only bent sticks and a bit of stolen cheese. You've become something between a farmer, a builder, and a survivalist, because that's what post-Roman Britain demands: versatility. You visit the neighbour's house, if it can be called that. It's a little more than a lean-to built against a low Roman wall. They've covered the gaps with wattle and daub, but you can still see the original stone archway poking out behind a curtain of straw. Inside, it's dark and smoky, and the air smells like damp dog and boiled roots. They're better off than some, though. They've got a cow, a real, live, slightly mad cow. That's wealth. You help haul some logs for them, twisted, soggy things that barely burn, and they offer you a scrap of dried apple in thanks. You nibble it like it's a feast. The sweetness almost makes your eyes water. The kid in the corner, about 6 years old and wearing 3 layers of rags, watches you like you might be a Roman spirit. You wink at him. He doesn't smile. Later you sit by your own fire, poking at it with a stick, trying to will it to grow. The wood is damp again, spitting angrily. You sigh and settle in, listening to the wind outside. It whistles through the trees, through the gaps in the walls, through your teeth. You wrap yourself tighter in your cloak and stare into the flame, which isn't so much heating you as it is distracting you from how cold you are. The fire crackles, and you wonder if the Romans ever imagined this. Did they know that one day their roads would crumble, their villas would flood, and their bathhouses would house goats? Did they ever look at you around and think, this is too good to last? You don't know. You just know you're here now in the cold trying to make it another night. And the question you can't stop asking, what comes next? Is this how it is now forever? The winter's always going to be this hard? Or will someone someday find a way to build something new? But not tonight. Tonight, you curl closer to the dying fire, pull your blanket to your chin, and try not to think too hard about tomorrow. The morning begins not with birdsong, but with the creaking groan of timber and the unsettling drip of melted frost finding its way through your roof. One drop lands squarely on your forehead. You grumble and roll over, pulling your blanket tighter, but the cold has already slithered in. Outside, a thick fog curls through the skeletal trees, clinging to the earth like it too is tired and heavy. Everything feels wet, the kind of damp that doesn't dry, just shifts around your clothes like a second skin. And your home, well, calling it a home might be generous. It's a timber-framed, mud-walled hut that leans slightly to one side like it's giving up too. You built it with your own hands, though, and in a weird way. That makes it feel like a part of you, drafts, leaks, and all. You push open the heavy wooden door and step outside into the biting air. Every breath tastes like iron and ash. The frost hasn't just touched the ground, it's swallowed it. The grass is gone, buried under a thin shell of white that crackles beneath your boots. You trudge around the back of the hut and eye the walls, daubs cracking again. You trace your fingers along the gaps, already thinking about mixing another batch, straw, clay and animal dung, your holy trinity of winter survival. The way you smear it between the wooden lattice walls is half necessity, half meditative art. A good mix keeps the wind out and the warmth in. A bad mix is why your left wall weeps when it rains. You glance at the neighbouring homes, each one a variation on the same theme. Timber frames, wattle walls, thatched roofs. A few more ambitious neighbours have added bits of stone to their lower walls, stolen from the Roman ruins nearby. The logic is simple. If it's survived this long, it's probably stronger than anything you can slap together with mud and prayer. Inside these huts, it's smoky, cramped, and always too dark, but it's something. And in this era, something is a blessing. There's a smell that hangs in the air, smoke, peat, and a faint whiff of manure. It's not unpleasant anymore. It's the smell of life continuing. You gather some dried bracken to toss into the hearth later, enough to spark a decent flame. Real firewood is a luxury these days. Trees near the village were cut down long ago, and no one wants to go deeper into the forest unless they have to. But you'll get to that eventually. For now, it's patchwork season, and this place needs serious patching. You head to the side wall and crouch, rubbing the damp spot where yesterday's snowmelt crept in. Cold seeps up through the soles of your boots, and you shift to avoid a puddle. The wind's picked up again, sliding across the landscape like a predator. Every gust finds new ways to poke into your home, reminding you that wattle and daub is a decent idea, but far from perfect. The cold always finds a crack, always. You run your hands along the timber, noting where it's warped. When the Romans built structures, they carved everything to precise angles. They had nails, real ones. You use wooden pegs, twisted twine, or, if you're desperate, chewed rawhide straps. The walls aren't square and the roof leans like an old man with a bad hip, but it stands. That's all that matters. It stands, for now. The history books will one day debate how much technical knowledge was lost when Rome fell. Some say much of it survived, tucked into monasteries or preserved in oral tradition. Others argue that generations passed without any clear idea of how their ancestors built with such precision. You're inclined to believe the latter, not because you've read a scroll, but because you've tried building something and you know how hard it is. There's no blueprint, no measuring stick, just instinct, trial and error, and a hope that the roof doesn't cave in on your head during the next snowstorm. By midday, your fingers are coated in clay. You've patched 2 sections of wall, reinforced the corner where the wind sneaks through, and tied a leather strap across a sagging beam. It's not elegant, but elegance isn't your concern, endurance is. Every improvement means one less chance of waking up to find your floor frozen solid or your roof split from the weight of snow. Inside, the hearth moulders quietly. You squat in front of it, feeding it bits of dried moss and bracken to coax it back to life. The smoke curls up and out the vent hole, not that it matters much. The whole hut leaks smoke in every direction. Your eyes sting constantly now, and the soot settles into your clothes like it belongs there. But the heat is what matters. Without it, everything stops. You stop. A lot of folks don't even bother building separate rooms anymore. The family, the animals, and all their worldly belongings exist in one smoky, low-ceilinged space. You've seen homes where goats are tied inside at night, not just for safety, but for warmth. Their breath and body heat raise the temperature just enough to keep the frost from forming on the walls, a living furnace. You've thought about bringing in your own scrawny goat, but he's got a temper and tends to relieve himself wherever he pleases. Still, if the cold gets worse, you might have to reconsider. And here's a fringe fact for you. Some of the best early insulation wasn't invented, it was grown. Moss, turf, and even sheep's wool were stuffed into cracks to keep out the wind. People got creative. You once saw a hut with a wall lined in fish scales. It smelled horrible, but the wind didn't get through. Whatever worked, people used. That's the essence of life now. Not about what's proper, but what gets you to spring. You sit down hard on your straw mat, exhausted but satisfied. The wool won't hold forever, but it'll last the next storm. Probably. Maybe. The fire crackles to life again, and you finally relax for a second. Letting the warmth wash over your numb fingertips. It's not a palace. It's not Rome. But it's a victory. A very small, very smoky victory. Outside, the wind howls again, long and low, like it's trying to remind you who's really in charge. You pull your cloak tighter and mumble something under your breath. Half curse, half prayer. The cold doesn't care what language you say it in. You know the real work doesn't start in winter. It starts before winter, way before. If you're not hustling in late summer and sweating through early autumn, then by January you're eating moss and regretting every lazy afternoon you ever took. The people who survive around here aren't just tough, they're obsessive about preparation. Winter is a slow-moving predator, and you have to feed yourself before it gets hungry. Today you've been tasked with the grim ritual of checking your food stores. The makeshift cellar is just a hole dug into the frost-hardened ground and lined with woven baskets, pottery jars and lumpy sacks. It's damp down there, damp enough that anything not properly wrapped tends to rot or mould. You lift the hide covering the entrance and ease yourself down the ladder, which is really just a notched log propped against the earthen wall. It creaks under your weight, and one of the rungs wobbles a little more than you'd like. Your breath hangs in front of you like a ghost as you reach the bottom. It's darker than you remember. You feel around blindly until your fingers find the basket of turnips. Still firm, that's good. You move on to the smoked meat, just a few small chunks wrapped in cloth and dangling from a beam overhead. Rats have chewed one of the cords. A piece is gone. You curse quietly and swat at the shadows, knowing full well it's too late. There's a crock of grain tucked in a corner. Barley, a little oat. You pinch a bit between your fingers, still dry, no mould, you sigh in relief. There's not much of it, but it'll stretch. You've become a master at turning barely edible into almost comforting. It's not about flavour, it's about calories. Fat and starch are your best friends now. You'd marry a pile of lard if it meant you'd get to February with your ribs still covered. You haul up a few items and stagger back into the light, squinting as you emerge from the cellar. The day's already fading because of course it is. The sun barely sticks around this time of year, like it's too tired to deal with you. A soft snow is falling, fine as flour, dusting everything in a deceptive beauty. You shake it off and head inside with your haul. Tonight's meal? A stew. Not because it's fancy, but because it's the only way to make 3 shriveled turnips, half an onion and a chunk of dried goat meat feel like something resembling dinner. You throw it all into a clay pot, add water and set it by the fire. It'll simmer for hours, mostly because you're trying to convince yourself it's doing something magical. As it bubbles, you think about last autumn, the sheer madness of harvest season. Every able-bodied soul out there from dawn to dusk pulling up root vegetables, drying herbs, salting meat, gathering every last nut, berry or edible weed. You remember that frantic energy, that unspoken fear driving everyone, because once the first frost hit, time stopped being measured in days and started being measured in how many sacks of food you had left. Some villages set quotas, share the food, keep everyone alive. Others, every family for themselves. You've heard stories of people stealing from neighbours' cellars, of barns mysteriously catching fire after someone was refused a loaf. It's a dangerous line, community versus survival. You try not to think about it, but you keep a rock under your pillow just in case, and you sleep lightly. There's an old saying around here, harvest feeds the winter, but hunger sharpens the knife. You never quite understood it until last year, when 2 brothers got into a fistfight over a basket of apples. The apples were bruised. One of them lost 3 teeth. You've since learned not to underestimate what desperation does to people. And here's something curious. A fringe little food trick some folks swear by. Fermented nettle mash. You're not sure who figured it out first, but apparently if you boil and ferment nettles with a bit of barley, it turns into a thick, sludgy paste that can last all winter. Tastes like the back end of a wet boot, but it keeps your strength up. You've had worse. You ladle yourself a cup of the stew, watery but warm, and sip it slowly, letting the steam hit your face. Your lips are chapped, and the heat stings a bit, but for a few minutes your belly feels full. Not stuffed, not satisfied, just less empty. You hold the bowl close, soaking in the radiating warmth like it's a miracle. Later that evening the village elder, Cadarn, stops by. He doesn't knock, no one really does anymore. He just pushes open your door with his crooked stick and stands there like some kind of winter prophet, snow piled on his cloak and eyebrows. He smells like pine resin and old mead. Got a root rot spreading near the western plots, he grumbles, not even greeting you. Might be the frost going deeper than we thought. You nod and offer him the last of the stew. He takes it wordlessly, drinks from the bowl like it's water, then hands it back. He looks at your fire, gives it a nod of approval. Still burning, that's something. It's the highest compliment you'll get. There's a debate, quiet among the older folks, about whether this climate's always been like this or if the winters are changing. You've heard whispers of a colder shift, of harsher seasons than even the Roman records mention. Some think it's punishment from the gods, others believe it's just the way of the world resetting itself. No one really knows, but you can feel it. Every year, the frost comes a little earlier, the thaw a little later. Every year, your cellar looks smaller. As Cadarn leaves, he mutters, "Stock what you can, don't count on March and Mabdier." You nod, even though it's not really advice, it's a warning. You curl up by the hearth that night, full enough to sleep. You think about your neighbour, the one with the rats in her cellar, and you wonder if she's eating tonight. You wonder if you'll trade something tomorrow, maybe an hour of work for a few smoked fish, or maybe just stories, if she's feeling generous. For now, you drift into the kind of sleep that only exhaustion brings, the fire casting a dull orange glow on the walls, and the scent of broth still clinging to your fingers. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the stew pot's empty. You wake in darkness again, though this time it's not the cold that pulls you from sleep, it's the sound. A sharp clatter in the distance followed by low voices. You sit up slowly, your blanket sliding off in a heap of scratchy wool and faint goat smell. The fire's burned low, nothing left but red coals and a few sparks. You listen hard. There it is again, someone's shouting. Not panicked, but agitated. You pull on your cloak and step out into the bitter air, feet crunching across the frost-hardened mud. At the edge of the village, a group is huddled around something. You can't see what until you get closer, pushing through the crowd with a few muttered excuses. At the centre of it all is a wooden crate, busted open, half empty, and a young man standing over it, face pale and trembling. His hands are stained dark from the contents of the box, slabs of meat, glistening red and starting to freeze. It's a trade delivery, or at least it was. Someone's raided it. The village was expecting a few barrels of dried goods and a bit of salted meat from the next hamlet over, a rare midwinter lifeline. And now, half's missing, and what's left is barely enough to feed 2 families for a week. You exchange glances with one of your neighbours, Elgan, the stone-faced man who hasn't smiled since the harvest failed 3 years ago. His jaw tightens. Everyone's thinking the same thing. This is bad. Food going missing is more than just inconvenient, it's a threat. Without that trade, the numbers get tighter. The math gets deadlier. There's a quiet kind of fury in the air now, hanging heavier than the snow. A few villagers start pointing fingers. No one has proof, of course, but suspicions are already taking root. You don't blame them. Hunger rewrites people. You've seen it in small ways, cheating on rations, hoarding scraps, pretending you didn't hear your neighbour's kid cry last night from an empty stomach. But this is big. This was the backup plan. And now it's gone. You drift back to your hut, uneasy, and sit down by the fire. You stoke it with the last of the dried moss you gathered yesterday, then tuck your hands under your cloak and close your eyes. You're not just worried about hunger, you're worried about what people might do before they're starving, and that brings you to salt. It's almost absurd how valuable it is now, this dusty, crystalline miracle that you never used to think twice about. Salt is survival. Salt keeps your meat from rotting. Salt keeps fish edible through February. Salt means you can eat something today and tomorrow. You've become hyper-aware of every grain. When you're lucky enough to trade for a pouch of it, you treat it like treasure. One of the village kids once called it white gold and no one laughed. This winter, the salt trade has dried up again. The coastal routes froze early and the roads are impassable with snow and ice. Traders from the east haven't come in over a month. Some say they have been blocked by Saxon raids. Others say the storms sank their ships. Either way, the result's the same. No salt. You're rationing what's left in your own stash. Maybe a few tablespoons at most. It's coarse and dirty looking, with little flecks of grit from the way it was processed. Doesn't matter. It works. You use it sparingly, pressing it into strips of meat with your fingertips like you're casting a spell. It has to last. You remember last year when one family tried using ash instead? Thought it might dry the meat. It didn't. The meat spoiled and 3 of them got sick. The healer couldn't do much, just chewed bark and prayed. You still remember the smell of that hut. There's a small, quiet debate that sometimes comes up around the fire, whether it's worth risking a trip to the coast for more salt. It's a 3-day journey in good weather. In winter, it's more like a week of wading through snowdrifts, sleeping under wet furs and hoping the wolves are hunting something else. A few young men volunteered last year. Only one came back. He was frostbitten and empty-handed. He doesn't speak much anymore. Still you wonder, is it worth trying again? You look at your dwindling supplies, 2 smoked fish, a few withered roots and 1 half-empty pouch of salt, and you don't say it out loud, but in your gut you know it. This won't be enough. You remember your grandfather's story how when he was young they used to boil seawater in clay pans over hot rocks. It was slow, wasteful, and you had to carry barrels of seawater uphill, but it worked, sort of. Maybe if you could get to the shore just once and bring back a few buckets, but again, roads. The snow. The endless, choking cold. And what if you go and someone else raids your hut while you're gone? You stare into the fire for a long time, chewing the inside of your cheek and weighing the options. The only certainty is that salt, this thing you barely noticed most of your life, is now the difference between eating meat in March and digging a shallow grave in February. Funny thing, there's an old folk belief that salt keeps evil spirits away. Sprinkle it across your doorstep and you're protected. Makes sense, in a weird way. The evil isn't always supernatural. Sometimes it's just the creeping stink of spoiled food, or the bone-thin man who's eyeing your cellar sits a little too closely. You lie back and stare at the soot-darkened ceiling. Somewhere outside, a dog barks once and falls silent. The wind sighs across the frozen thatch. You close your eyes and dream, not of warm weather, but of a stone basin full of pure white salt. You take a handful and throw it in the air and it rains down like snow, clean, bright and full of life. And then you wake up, still cold, still hungry, still here. By now the days are so short they feel like rumours. You blink and the light's already fading, the sun trailing low and sluggish across the horizon, like it can't quite be bothered. But today, you've got a mission. You're going underground. Not metaphorically, literally. Because down there, under the frost line, it's warmer. Not cosy, exactly, but warmer in the way a stale blanket is better than nothing. A few families near the edge of the village have dug partial shelters into the earth. Sunken rooms, or what pass for basements really. Half-covered pits reinforced with timber, clay and whatever leftover stone they can steal from the Roman ruins. They're not elegant, and they definitely smell like wet dirt and regret, but they make a huge difference when the wind howls loud enough to shake your bones. You've helped dig a few of these over the years. The work is miserable, cold, muddy, and often interrupted by frozen ground that laughs at your best shovels. But once you're inside, crouched low and surrounded by earth, there's a kind of dead silence that wraps around you. The cold slows, the wind disappears, and everything goes still. The temperature down there hovers just above freezing, which might not sound impressive, unless you've spent a week in a hut where your breath freezes on your lips. Today you're checking on one of these shelters for a family that's fallen sick. The entrance is just a ragged square of timber framed into the hillside, partially hidden by snow and brush. You tug open the crude door, then duck inside. The earth breathes out at you, a heavy musty smell of soil, ash, and of the faintest hint of mildew. You lower yourself down the earthen steps, hands braced against the walls. Inside it's dark as a cellar and warmer than you expected. Not much, but enough to make your face tingle as your skin adjusts. There's a fire smouldering low in a pit off to the side, its smoke funneled lazily through a pipe that disappears into the wall and up into the hill. A few torches burn, casting everything in flickering gold. The family lies bundled under cloaks and furs, faces pale, foreheads slick with fever sweat. A woman stirs weakly and tries to sit up. You offer her a pouch of boiled water mixed with wild mint and elderbark, the closest thing anyone has to medicine. She drinks it in small sips. You see the grateful exhaustion in her eyes. You stay with them a while, stoking the fire and checking the food baskets. They've got roots and dried berries, not much else. You promise to bring more if you can. It's not a lie, but you don't know if you'll be able to. No one has much to spare anymore. As you sit there in that sunken room, something dawns on you. This place might be primitive, but it's also brilliant. These semi-subterranean homes borrow heat from the earth itself. It's a technique older than Rome, older than history, just soil, structure, and human stubbornness. The Celts did it, the Norse did it. Some say it goes back to the Bronze Age, and yet it feels cutting edge again. That's the Dark Ages for you, innovation by remembering what your ancestors already figured out. You think about building your own. Maybe not a full dugout, but something close. A root cellar big enough to sleep in when the wind gets bad. You've heard of a man who even built his fire below his floor, heating the stones around his bed. You have no idea if it worked, but it sounds incredible. Fire beneath your feet. Imagine. Back above ground, the world has grown even colder. Your boots crunch as you climb out of the shelter, and the wind slaps you across the face like it's offended you survived another hour. You tug your cloak tighter and head back toward the centre of the village, passing a couple of kids trying to slide down a frozen hill on a wooden plank. Their laughter slices through the gloom like a hot knife. It's so unexpected you stop and smile. Even here, even now, they're still finding ways to play. You think about how many winters you've endured, too many to count. Each one leaves a scar, not always physical, but something deeper. A tension in your jaw that doesn't fade until spring. A tightness in your chest when you hear the wind start up at night. But the shelters help. The earth holds its warmth, stubborn and silent, even as the world above freezes and fractures. There's debate, of course, as there always is. Some say these shelters are a bad idea, that sleeping underground is unhealthy, that the air goes stale, and that disease festers. And honestly, they're not wrong. If you don't manage smoke properly, it can choke you in your sleep. If you forget to dig a drain, meltwater will flood your floor. And yes, rats. Always rats. But still, if it's a choice between coughing and freezing, most people will take the cough. You head back to your hut, your breath fogging in front of you like steam from a crack kettle. By the time you get inside, your toes are numb again, and you don't even bother trying to get the fire going right away. You sit, wrap your arms around your knees, and just breathe. Deep, steady breaths. You can still feel the warmth of the shelter clinging to your skin. It's fading fast, but it reminds you that you've got options. You mark out a rough drawing in the dirt floor with your finger, something like a dugout, something like hope. A place to retreat to if this winter drags on like the last one did. You might not build it tomorrow, or even this week, but the idea is planted now, and that matters. Outside, the sky shifts from grey to a darker, meaner grey. You know another storm's coming. You can smell it in the air, taste it in the back of your throat, but you're not as scared as you were yesterday. Because now you know there's warmth under your feet. Buried, yes, but waiting, just like you. There's one animal in your life you haven't eaten yet, and that's not because you didn't think about it. It's because she's too valuable. Her name is Tilda, and she's your only surviving you, small, grey, stubborn, and smarter than she lets on. She's more than just a sheep. She's your coat, to your blanket, your occasional milk supply, and on particularly cold nights, your somewhat reluctant bedfellow. You've grown weirdly attached to her, the way you'd get attached to a fire if it had eyes and a constant low-pitched bleat. Tilda lives in a makeshift lean-to you built against your hut, and she has a bad habit of chewing anything soft left within reach. Sleeves, rope, hay, sometimes even your hair. But when the temperature drops below freezing, you invite her inside. Not out of kindness, but mutual desperation. Her thick wool and body heat are worth more than any firewood. In the dead of winter, you don't turn down warmth, even if it comes with a side of sheep stink. This morning, you find her pressed against the wall of the shelter, steam rising gently off her back. She gives you a look that says she's unimpressed with your sleeping arrangements, which is fair. You haven't mucked out the corner in days, and everything's starting to smell like wet wool and bad decisions, but you scratch her behind the ears anyway, because she's family now. In the time since the harvest, you've sheared her wool once, reluctantly, in late autumn, and what's left has grown into a dense, tangled coat. Perfect insulation. You've spun some of that wool into thread using a spindle made from a stick and a stone the old-fashioned way. It's slow, almost painfully so, but weirdly soothing. There's something honest about twisting fibre into something useful with your own fingers. You made a pair of mittens that way. Lopsided, itchy, and absolutely priceless. Wool is the unsung hero of your survival. You wear it constantly. Wool tunics, wool leggings, wool wrappings around your feet. It's warm even when it's damp, which it always is, and when layered correctly, it creates a cocoon that almost tricks your body into thinking everything's okay. You've learned how to patch your clothes using thread pulled from old garments, and you've even bartered a skein or two for dried fish when the meat ran low. Everyone wants wool. Everyone needs wool. You've seen people fight over half-finished cloaks like they were bags of grain. You think back to your younger days, when you didn't understand why your mother took so much time preparing fleece. Cleaning it, carding it, spinning it into endless bundles of yarn. You thought it was just busy work. Now as you sit by the fire with Tilda snoring gently behind you, you get it. That yarn was survival disguised as routine. The funny thing, Romans didn't wear much wool when they could avoid it. They preferred linen and silk, imported fabrics that flowed and shimmered. But up here in the north, on the edge of the world, where the wind feels like punishment, nothing beats a sheep. It's said the Britons before the Romans practically worshipped the animal. And honestly, you get it. She's softer, warm, occasionally generous with her milk, and doesn't talk back. What's not to love? Outside, the snow falls steadily, heavy flakes that pile up fast. You know from experience it'll bury everything by nightfall. This is the kind of snow that turns the village into a silent ghost town, where every step is muffled and the roofs all blend into the horizon. You check your firewood stash again. Not good. Tilda eyes you from her corner, chewing slowly, and you shake your head. Not yet, you mutter. But don't test me. There's a fringe belief that sheep can predict the weather, something in the way they act, how they stand, the pitch of their bleating. Old Era swears Tilda started pacing the day before the last blizzard hit. You're not sure if that's true, or if she was just hungry and bored. Still, you find yourself watching her more closely now, as if she's some woolly oracle. In the early afternoon, you wrap yourself in every layer you own and head out to check on another family's animals. It's part duty, part trade. You help tend their livestock, and they give you milk and a few strips of jerky. Their cow didn't make it past mid-December, but they've still got 3 goats and a shivering donkey. You reinforce the shelter's windbreak with some spare timber, feed the animals the last of the dried nettle hay, and rub warmth into their brittle ears. It's a routine, but it matters. You return to your hut just as the snow thickens. Tilda's still inside, now sprawled out in front of the hearth like she owns the place. You laugh under your breath and slide in next to her. The warmth is immediate. Her body is like a furnace, slow and steady, far more reliable than the peat fire smouldering in the pit. There's something deeply ancient about this, sharing space with an animal for survival. You imagine your ancestors doing the same, maybe even in this same stretch of land, leaning into the same dull warmth, breathing the same hay-dusty air. There's no pride in it, but there's comfort. Of course, there's always debate. Some folks think it's unclean to keep livestock indoors. They argue it spreads illness, brings fleas, weakens the spirit. Others, like you, see it as necessity. In the winter, every degree of heat counts. Every warm body is part of the plan. Besides, if your spirit's weakened, it's probably because you haven't had a proper meal in 2 weeks, and not because your sheep snores. That night, you wrap yourself in your cloak, press your back against Tilda's side, and doze off to the gentle rhythm of her breathing. The wind howls through the trees, rattling the door like it wants in, but inside your little hut is a fragile pocket of warmth, patched together with mud, straw and wool. You feel it in your bones. This is what survival looks like. Not glorious, not noble, but stubborn and a little bit ridiculous. And as you drift off, Davies, you swear you hear Tilda sigh. You're awake before dawn and not because you want to be. Something stirred, a shift in air, a hush in the wind, maybe a sixth sense that only kicks in when your life depends on fire not dying. You sit up, instantly alert, and glance toward the hearth. The fire's nearly gone, just a scatter of coals weakly glowing like dying eyes. You scramble across the cold floor, snatching at dried moss and the smallest twigs you've set aside. There's no time for kindling rituals. You need heat, now. You blow gently, then again, cheeks puffing until you're dizzy. The embers resist you, sullen and stubborn. A flicker, a spark. You press more moss into the centre, whispering nonsense words under your breath like it's a spell, because honestly, at this point, it is. You do anything. Promise the gods a new goat. To swear off turnip soup forever. Trade your last wool mitten for a single clean flame. And then, finally, the moss catches. A small orange tongue licks the wood and curls into a flame. You nearly sob with relief. Tilda snorts behind you, annoyed that you've disturbed her, and rolls over with a thunk. You ignore her. You've got bigger problems, like the fact that you nearly froze to death in your sleep again. In a dark age winter, fire doesn't get to rest. It's not a luxury. It's a member of the family, and if you let it die, everyone suffers. Most nights you sleep lightly, waking every couple hours to check the coals, add fuel, adjust the venting stones so the smoke doesn't choke you out or freeze you into a statue. It's a weird, intimate relationship, you and the fire. You feed it, nurse it, beg it not to leave. It rewards you by keeping your toes attached to your feet. You rise, stretch and throw on your cloak. It's stiff with frost along the hem. The air in the hut is thick with smoke and breath. You can feel the dampness crawling up your spine, the way it does when the fire's been out too long. Everything aches. You head outside to check the fire pit you built last month, the emergency one, dug into the ground with a layer of stones to reflect heat. It's protected by a leaning ring of turf walls, almost invisible under snow. It takes 3 tries, but you manage to get a fire going again. This one's bigger, open to the sky, built to burn hotter and faster. You hold your hands out and watch the ice crystals melt off your skin. It's a beautiful thing, a good fire, orange and gold, crackling and snapping with purpose. It's alive, and you've made peace with the fact that you depend on it completely. Back in the hut, you light the indoor hearth from the fresh flame and feed it slowly. Scraps of peat, some dried bracken, a few tiny twigs you scavenged weeks ago, and carefully dried in a pouch tucked into your tunic for warmth. Firewood? Forget it. Trees are far, and the snow's too deep. No one wants to be the next fool who dies in the woods trying to haul back a frozen log, not unless you're suicidal or desperate, or both. Fuel in winter is a complicated equation. You've learned to burn almost anything that smoulders. Dried dung, moss, animal fat, even old rope soaked in oil. The smell's awful, sure, but it works. Everyone has their preferences. Some swear by peat, cut from the moor, dried into bricks and stacked like treasure. Others hoard pine cones, which burn fast and hot but spit sparks like angry bees. You just use what you can find and don't ask too many questions. There's an argument you overheard once, 2 elders debating whether early Britons used fire pits or stone braziers more often. One swore by sunken hearths. The other believed raised stone basins were the superior method, especially for smoke control. They argued for 2 hours while wrapped in 3 cloaks apiece. And you thought it was the stupidest way to spend body heat you'd ever seen, but you listened. Because even in winter, people want to know things. Fire brings out philosophy, apparently. You remember the first time your fire died completely. It was 3 years ago, midwinter. You were sick, fevered, barely able to lift your head. You woke in the dark, ice on the walls, and the hearthstone was cold. Dead cold. You tried to relight it, but your hands were shaking too hard. You ended up crawling to your neighbour's hut and begging for flame like a stray dog. They gave you a coal wrapped in ash and straw, precious, almost ceremonial. That coal saved your life. You never forgot it. Now you keep 3 fire sources at all times, 1 in the hearth, 1 smouldering outside under a clay dome, and a third, a tightly wrapped ember hidden in a cow horn stuffed with moss and sealed with wax. That's your traveller's fire. If the hut burns down or the wind snuffs your hearth, that ember might be the only thing standing between you and frostbitten oblivion. You eat a bit of yesterday's stew, reheated over the flame. It's mostly water now with a hint of onion and regret. Still, it's warm. And when you swallow it, you feel life slide back into your limbs, 1 spoonful at a time. You feed Tilda a bit of root mash and scratch her behind the ears. She's cranky in the mornings, just like you. You sit in front of the fire wrapped in your cloak, and think about how many lives it saved. Not just yours. Every hut in this village burns something day and night. You can smell it constantly in the air, smoke and ash and peat. The whole valley smells like fire. It's the scent of survival. The Romans had hypercausts, underground heating systems that piped hot air through walls and floors. You've seen the ruins, touched the old tiles, still soot-blackened from fires long dead. You can't help but imagine what it was like. Walking barefoot on warm stone, never worrying about your fire going out in the night, a luxury you can't even comprehend. Historians argue about how widespread those systems really were. Some think only the elite had them. Others claim even modest Roman homes had clever heat systems. Either way, none of that helps you now. You've got a pile of peat and a stolen bit of spark. That's your hypocaust. Outside, the wind kicks up again. Snow spirals past the door, hissing against the walls like it's trying to get in. You adjust the smoke hole vent, double-check your fuel pile, and throw another handful of moss onto the fire. The flames leap, dancing. For now, you're warm, for now the fire lives. You settle into your seat by the hearth, back to the wall, bowl in hand. There's still a long night ahead, and the fire, your stubborn, sputtering, loyal fire, has to last every minute of it. By late afternoon, the wind's too strong to ignore. It's clawing at the door, slipping under the frame, slapping the walls with icy hands. You hear the roof groan with every gust, the thatch trembling under its frozen burden. And even though you told yourself you wouldn't do this again, you open the door just a crack and step outside to check the lashings. Just in time to have a blast of snow punch you square in the face. You stumble back, cursing, eyes streaming, breath stolen from your lungs. Winter doesn't knock. It kicks the door in and tracks mud across your floor. You yank your cloak tight, wrap a scarf across your mouth and squint into the storm. Everything's blurry. White, grey, and movement. The huts are shapes in the fog. You count them in your head to stay oriented. 1, 2, 3. There's the stolen ruin where Brenna keeps her chickens. 4, 5. Your neighbour's hut, already half buried in drifting snow. She's smart. She stacked reeds against the base of her walls. Insulation. You should have done that. You check the rope lashings holding your thatch. They're frayed. Ice-covered, but holding. You retie 2 of them with frozen fingers, mumbling curses that would make a priest blush. It's the kind of cold that steals your thoughts mid-sentence. The kind that makes your bones feel brittle, like if you fall you'll shatter. Then you hear it. A grunt, low and unmistakable. You freeze. It's coming from the hut next to yours, the one where old Geraint lives. Alone, mostly. He hasn't been seen much this week. You hesitate, then trudge over, leaning into the wind, boots crunching through the thigh-deep snow. His door's ajar, snow already drifting inside. You knock. No answer. You push it open. It's dark inside, even darker than usual. The hearth is dead. Geraint lies bundled on his straw bed, breathing shallow, his skin pale as snow. His lips are cracked. You rush to the fire pit, poke at the ashes, cold, useless. You swear again, louder this time, and run back to your own hut. In minutes you've wrapped a coal from your hearth in a cloth soaked in rendered fat. your most precious travel fire, and carry it back to him. You build a new fire as fast as you can, hands shaking from both cold and panic. When the first flames catch, licking upward like a slow yawn, you feel something ease inside your chest. He stirs as the warmth returns, barely, just enough to murmur your name and ask if it's still January. You smile without humour. It's always January, you say. You spend the next few hours checking over his supplies. Not much, some root vegetables gone soft, and one sealed jar of lentils. You make a thin soup and force him to drink. He swears at you for waking him up, but that's how you know he's coming back. This isn't the first time you've had to revive someone with a flame. It won't be the last. In winter, you don't just tend your own fire, you tend others too. You pass it like a torch, like a secret. Fire isn't something you own. It's something you share when you can, because once it's out, it's not always coming back. You stay with Geraint until night falls, adding fuel, adjusting the venting stones, rubbing his hands to keep the blood flowing. He talks in circles, drifting in and out of sleep, tells you stories you've already heard. Mentions a wife who died 5 winters ago. Her name was Eleri. You'd forgotten. Eventually, when he's steady enough to sit on his own, you go back out into the storm. The snow's worse now, coming down Vulways, sharp as sand. Your face is numb before you reach your own door. You nearly collapse as you step inside, lungs burning, knees weak. Tilda bleats once, unimpressed with your drama. You flick snow off your shoulders, pull off your boots, and sit in front of the hearth. You've burned through too much fuel. The pile's down to a few bricks of peat and a clump of pine cones. You'll have to go out again soon, not tonight. But soon, or you'll end up like Geraint, if you're lucky. If you're not, well, the snow's still falling, but you feel safe for now. You toss a scrap of salted root into a pot of water and call it dinner. The fire spits and hisses, bright and alive, and you sit there watching it, barely blinking. It feels like a miracle. Every flame, every breath of warmth. You know better than to take it for granted. There's a strange little tale people tell around here, half myth, half bedtime story, about a fire spirit named Arthur. He's said to walk the villages in the coldest hours of the night, looking for embers left untended. If he finds one nearly out, he breathes on it and brings it roaring back to life. If he finds none, he takes the warmth from your body instead. You don't believe it, of course, but every night, before you sleep, you tuck your coals deep into the hearth, pat them with moss, and whisper a thank you, just in case. Historians debate whether this kind of constant fire tending was really that intense. Some argue that well-built hearths and smart fuel usage could maintain warmth without this obsessive care. Others say the hardship has been exaggerated, that it wasn't that bad. You'd love to invite those historians into your hut during a night like this and let them try to sleep without feeding the flame, see how they like it. By midnight the fire's low again, and you wake from a shallow doze to feed it. You move automatically, not fully conscious, a creature of routine and soot and smoke. It's like tending a baby. You poke the coals, add a little moss, press on a chunk of peat. You don't speak, you don't yawn, you just do. And as the fire flares once more, painting the walls in orange shadows, you let yourself fall back onto your mat, curled tight around a hot stone wrapped in cloth. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, your fire keeps breathing. The mead is gone. You stare at the empty jug like it betrayed you in your sleep. You shake it gently, hoping for a hidden splash, a final drop clinging to the bottom like hope. Nothing, just the faint smell of fermented honey, and the sad reality that the long, grim tunnel of winter has gotten narrower. You were saving that last bit, for a celebration, for a thaw, for anything really, but last night when the cold slipped into your bones and your dreams were all teeth and hunger, you drank it. And now, the jug is dry, you're not the only one running out. Across the village, food is dwindling, the smoked meat is nearly gone, the roots are shriveled and soft, the oats have started to smell a little off. But it's not just food that's vanishing, it's patience, spirits, sanity. Whatever fragile sense of humour people had in November is now buried under 3 feet of snow and a growing pile of passive-aggressive glares. This is late winter, the part they don't write songs about. There's a word your people use, one that doesn't translate well, Tharnag. It means something between hunger and dread. It's what settles in your chest around February, when the sun's light starts to return but your food doesn't. When you've chewed every tough rind, sucked the marrow from every bone, and suddenly every conversation starts circling back to who might have hidden reserves. You don't want to be that person, the one who watches your neighbour's bowl just a little too closely. But here you are. You take inventory again. It's become your morning ritual, part prayer, part punishment. 1 smoked fish, 3 shriveled parsnips, a pouch of grain so small it could pass as a joke, the salt's down to a thin crust at the bottom of a cracked pot. You scrape it with your finger and tap it into a leather pouch, feeling oddly like a thief stealing from yourself. You boil water, no tea left, and drink it slowly, savouring the warmth if not the flavour. Tilda watches you, chewing a patch of straw that might have once been your boot lining. Even she looks annoyed. You haven't milked her in days, she's too thin. You whisper apologies and promise her more food soon, but even you don't believe it. Back when the mead was flowing, winter felt tolerable. Mead made people generous, made fires burn warmer, made bad stew taste like feasts. There were songs, jokes, even flirtation. People remembered how to smile. Mead was a shield, a numbing spell. And now that it's gone, everyone's edges are sharper. Laughter is rare. You start to notice the things you were too tipsy to care about before. The smell of unwashed bodies, the cracked lips, the way the healer's left eye won't stop twitching. You head outside to check the traps you set days ago, snares hidden under snow tucked near brush piles, baited with bits of mouldy grain. It's a long shot, but hunger does strange things to hope. You trudge through snow that swallows your shins, your breath steaming out of your mouth in thick puffs. The wind is quiet today, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you suspicious. Your first trap is empty, the bait stolen, the string snapped. The second one, a mouse frozen stiff, barely worth cooking. The third, a rabbit, small, scrawny, but alive when you find it, its leg caught in the twine. You whisper thanks to every god you can name and kill it quickly, cleanly. You're not squeamish anymore. You can't afford to be. Back in your hut, you skin the rabbit, gut it, and drop the meat into a pot with water and whatever herbs are left. A pinch of dried nettle, some garlic leaves, and a scrap of dried mushroom you found last week growing on your firewood. It's not a meal, it's a mirage, but it smells like possibility. While it simmers, you think about last winter's mead festival, Yule, when you all gathered in the longhouse and passed around a shared cup. Even the grumpiest elders joined in. There was dancing, a fiddler with 3 fingers, someone brought a candle from a Roman ruin and claimed it still had magic in it. You don't even remember what you laughed about, just that you did. Now no one's laughing, no one's even speaking unless they have to. You haven't seen the peddler since before the first snow. You suspect he's either dead or smart enough to wait until spring. You envy him, whichever it is. There's a folk tale about a ghost that visits in the depths of winter, a woman in white who wanders from hut to hut looking for warmth. If she finds your hearth cold, she takes something with her when she leaves. Your luck, your voice, sometimes your shadow. You're not superstitious, but every now and then, when you wake in the middle of the night to tend the fire and catch your reflection in a dark window, you wonder if she's already been. There's some debate among the village's older folk about whether winter was easier, back when the Romans were here. They had wine, one insists. They had system, says another. You've heard it all, heated baths, tiled floors, real walls. But they also had taxes, garrisons, and bureaucracy. And when the empire crumbled, those comforts vanished with them. The only thing that stuck around was the cold. The rabbit stew is ready, and you ladle a small bowl for yourself and another for Tilda. More broth than meat, but she needs it too. You both eat in silence, her chewing noisily, you slurping like it might fool your stomach into thinking there's more. Afterward, you clean the pot with snow and pack the rabbit bones in cloth. Tomorrow you'll boil them again. Even bones can feed you, if you're patient enough. Boil them long enough and they turn into something almost nourishing. Almost. That night you sit by the fire, staring into the coals, thinking about all the things that used to make winter bearable. Honey, mead, singing, the promise of a thaw. All of it feels far away now, but the fire still burns, the walls still hold, and Tilda is still here, farting gently in her sleep. You pull your cloak tight, lie down beside the hearth and whisper to yourself, "We're not done yet." And maybe you're not. You wake to the silence again. Not the soft, sleepy kind, but the dense, uneasy quiet that settles over everything when nature itself seems to hold its breath. No birdsong, no animals abroad scurrying, not even the creak of trees. Just stillness, as if the world outside has frozen solid. You don't move right away. Your body is warm, thanks to Tilda curled at your back and the fire still glowing in the hearth. And breaking that bubble means stepping into cold that might bite back harder than yesterday. But you can't stay huddled forever. There's work to do, and a journey to make. You're heading to the neighbouring village today, or rather, what's left of it. It's barely more than a cluster of huts along the old Roman road, 2 miles through the forest, past the split stone with the faded carving, some forgotten god maybe, or just a decorative accident. Normally, it's not a dangerous trip, but in midwinter, it's another story. You eat half a bowl of warmed broth, press the remaining coals deeper into the ash for safekeeping, and gather your travel gear. Not much. A wool cloak, thick-soled boots lined with moss and whatever fur scraps you could stitch together, a small pouch of dried root slices in case the journey takes longer than expected, a knife, and of course your traveller's ember, a chunk of glowing coal sealed in a clay pot, tucked inside your coat like a secret heartbeat. You leave Tilda behind this time, locking her in the hut with food and enough fire to last. She protests briefly, then plops back down and starts chewing her bedding. She'll be fine. The road, if you can call it that, is blanketed in snow. The Roman stones are still there in some places, slick with ice, half swallowed by dirt and weeds. You step carefully, hugging the tree line for shelter. The wind is bitter and sharp, blowing sideways and slicing into any crack in your clothing like it has a grudge. About halfway through, you hit the river. In summer, it's barely a creek, but now it's a silent but frozen sheet of silver, glinting under a pale sky. You test the ice with a stick, twice, then again with your foot, slowly transferring weight, ears straining for the crack of betrayal. But it holds. You cross slowly, knees slightly bent, heart pounding, every breath visible in front of you like your soul trying to escape. You think about all the people who've died trying to cross frozen rivers in winter. It's a frequent subject in cautionary tales told by village elders. Some unlucky fool tries to shave a few minutes off a journey, misjudges the thickness, and vanishes under the ice before anyone hears the splash. You're not ready to be that story. Not today. Across the river, the forest thickens. Trees loom bare and black against the snow, like they're mourning something. The wind dies down, replaced by a hush so complete it almost presses on your ears. Your boots crunch softly. Somewhere in the distance, a branch creaks, and you freeze. Could be nothing. Could be a deer. Or it could be something else. You grip your knife tighter. Dark Age Britons don't travel in winter if they can help it. Roads are unsafe, paths get lost, wolves roam wider. And bandits! Well, hunger has a way of turning men into something worse than wolves. You've heard stories, everyone has. Travellers disappearing, caravans looted, bones found weeks later, half buried in slush. No one asks too many questions when someone doesn't return. Everyone just nods grimly and double-checks their door latches. When you finally spot the first roof of the neighbouring village, your lungs ache and your fingers are numb. But the relief is real. Smoke rises from 2 chimneys. That's a good sign. Fires mean people. Fires mean not corpses. You're greeted by Rodri, a man built like an ox and wearing a beard that could hide a family of mice. He doesn't smile. No one does anymore. But he nods and lets you in. Their huts are smaller than yours, but built better. Lower to the ground, packed with turf, reinforced with planks stolen from a forgotten Roman outpost. They know how to survive here. They invite you to sit by the hearth. It takes a while for feeling to return to your fingers, and even longer for someone to speak. Finally, a woman named Malis hands you a bowl of hot liquid. You don't ask what's in it. You drink, and it burns beautifully on the way down. You came here hoping for a trade. Dried beans or salt, maybe a bit of oil, but their stores are thin too. Rodri explains they lost 2 goats last week, and one of their huts collapsed under snow. No one died, but they had to burn the thatch for warmth. We're holding on, he says, eyes dull. Just, you offer what little you can, some rabbit bone meal, a bit of moss-wrapped coal, and a handful of dried nettle. In return, they give you 3 strips of cured meat and a square of wax cloth to help insulate your door. It's not much, but it's honest. No one's greedy here. Winter has a way of burning greed out of you. Before you leave, Malis presses a small carved token into your hand. A charm, she says, to keep the river solid, to guide your feet. You don't believe in charms, but you thank her anyway and tie it to your belt. The return trip is harder. The wind's picked up again, your legs are heavy, and you feel the early signs of chill bite on your fingers, but you push through. When you finally see your own hut again, its crooked roof, its smoking chimney, you nearly collapse from the relief. You stumble inside, collapse next to the fire, and let the heat soak back into your bones. Tilda bleats once and licks your face. You made it. No broken ice, no bandits, no ghosts in the forest, just you, your ember, and the cold that never stops trying to take it from you. You should never trust a forest in winter. It's not like the summer woods where everything hums with life and colour and bees drunkenly flop into flowers. Winter turns the forest into something else entirely. Quieter, yes, but also meaner. The trees stand like skeletal sentries, tall and still, with no leaves to rustle or birds to chatter. The wind moves through them in long, slow sighs, and the snow collects in drifts that hide rocks, holes, and whatever else might be waiting beneath. You don't just walk through the forest in winter, you negotiate with it, but today you have to go in. You've got no choice. Your firewood supply is down to one mossy lump of pine and a broom handle you've been pretending not to notice. The peat stash is soggy, the straw's burning too fast, and the snow's been falling so steadily that even smoke has trouble escaping the chimney. So you do what you said you wouldn't. You grab your axe, wrap your hands, and head for the woods. No one likes going in there alone, especially in February. It's the time of year when the hunger gets loud. Not just yours, everything in the forest is desperate. Foxes, crows, weasels, the odd wild dog, and wolves maybe. People argue about that. Some say the wolves died out generations ago, hunted to extinction or pushed north. Others swear they still live deep in the woods, lean and silent, waiting for a reason to come closer. You don't dwell on it, you focus on your steps. Crunching through the snow with each cautious footfall. You carry your axe low and slow, not swinging it like a warrior, but cradling it like a promise. You're not here to conquer anything, you just need a few dry branches, maybe some fallen logs, just enough to keep your hearth breathing another 2 days. As you walk deeper, the sounds of the village fade away. The forest absorbs everything, your footsteps, your breath, even the occasional muttered curse as you trip over a buried root. Snow falls in lazy spirals, soft and relentless. The branches above you creak gently. Every now and then you see a print. Animal, probably fox. Once you spot a set of deer tracks, deep and clean, heading northeast. You wonder where they're going. You wonder if they're starving too. Eventually you find a cluster of downed branches tangled around an old stump. They're dry enough to burn, but tangled with brambles and packed in ice. You set to work, hacking gently with your axe. Careful not to slip or strain. This is delicate labour, equal parts strength and patience. Every swing costs calories you barely have. You pause halfway through and sit on the stump, catching your breath. Your fingers are numb again, even wrapped in wool and leather. You blow on them, flexing them until you feel the sting of returning sensation. Your stomach growls. You pull out a slice of dried root and chew on it like a grudge. Suddenly you hear a sound, a crack behind you, a twig snapping. Not far off. You freeze. Every instinct in your body goes still like a hunted animal. You turn your head slowly. Nothing. Just trees. Just snow, but the air feels different now, tenser, heavier. Another sound, soft, deliberate, a footstep. You rise, gripping your axe tightly, your heart is pounding now. You scan the tree line, eyes straining against the white glare. You tell yourself it's just the forest, just the wind, just a deer. Then something moves. You catch it in the corner of your eye, just a flicker, a shape, a blur between two trees, and then it's gone. You don't wait. You gather the branches you've chopped, lash them together with your rope, and start dragging them back toward the path. Fast. Not running, just fast enough to get out before curiosity gets you killed. You don't look back. You don't want to see what might be there. You don't want to confirm anything. Sometimes not knowing is how you stay sane. It's nearly dark when you reach the edge of the village again. Your arms ache. Your boots are soaked. The bundle of wood drags behind you like a carcass. Someone sees you and waves. You nod, trying not to show how hard you're shaking. Back in your hut, you drop the wood by the hearth and fall into your seat, shivering. You peel off your gloves, hold your hands to the fire and whisper, "We made it." Tilda bleats softly and nuzzles your arm. You scratch her head, grateful beyond words that she's still warm, still breathing, still here. You add a branch to the fire and watch it catch. The crackle is the best sound you've heard in days. Later that night, you talk with your neighbour through the wall, a strange custom that's developed over the years. You both lean against the timber, speaking quietly through a gap in the boards. It's not quite a conversation, more like a shared confession. "Forest's bad today," you say. "Something's moving around in there," she replies. You nod, even though she can't see. You know, you felt it. There's a theory that the forest used to be sacred, places of gods and ancestors, not fear. People left offerings, gathered herbs, sang to the trees. Now they barely enter them. The fear is newer, or maybe just older than memory. Some think the shift happened after the Romans left, when the roads crumbled and wild things took over again. Others say it's always been this way, that the forest was never a friend. You fall asleep that night with your axe by your bed and a torch burning low beside the hearth. Not because you expect trouble, just because. And in your dreams you walk the forest again. Snow falling, branches creaking, something watching from the dark. The feast is not what it used to be. Tonight is midwinter's turning, Yule's brittle cousin, the night when the longest darkness begins to shrink, if only by a hair. In the old days it was a real celebration. Singing, dancing, wild stories, every hut lit up with candles and torches, warmth pouring out of windows, food piled high. They used to say the gods themselves came down from the hills on this night, trading blessings for roasted meat and a good song. Now, the gods would be lucky to get a bowl of weak broth and a tired shrug. Still, the village insists on marking the occasion. Maybe out of habit, maybe out of fear. People need something to aim at. Even if it's just a flimsy excuse to gather around a fire and pretend the world's not trying to kill them. You pull on your thickest cloak, still patched with Tilda's wool, and step out into the night. Snow crunches beneath your boots, fresh and soft, like someone shook powdered flour across the village. The moon is low, fat and smudged, throwing a dull silver glow across the landscape. You can hear voices already, quiet, cautious. No one yells anymore, not this deep into winter. The longhouse is half collapsed on one end, but someone's reinforced it with snow-packed turf and rotting fence posts. It looks like a wounded animal, crouched under the weight of the season. Inside, a fire smoulders in the centre pit, and a few people are gathered around it, huddled like pilgrims around a dying god. You recognise nearly everyone. Of course you do. There aren't that many of you left. There's food, technically. A pot of stew made from root vegetables no one could name even when they were fresh. Bits of fish. A bread loaf hard enough to be considered a weapon. Someone brought fermented turnip wine. It smells like regret. You drink it anyway. You settle next to the fire, shoulders hunched, cloak drawn tight, and accept a bowl of stew. It's watery and grey, but it's warm, and that's what matters now. Someone across the pit starts humming an old song. A wordless tune with the rhythm of rocking boats and hearthside spinning. Others join in, soft and unsure. It's not music exactly, it's memory. The fire cracks, sparks jump. For a moment it almost feels like the old days, like you're part of something. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, just for a bit. Then someone brings out the bones. You knew this was coming, it's tradition. Each winter gathering, someone lays out the bone dice, jagged little things carved from goat knuckles and fox spines. And the stories start. This isn't gambling, it's prophecy, or something close. You roll, and the elder tells you what your season holds. It's meant to give hope, or at least direction. You roll a pair of crow bones. The elder squints, frowns, and mumbles something about shadows crossing paths. Not ideal. You thank her anyway. Everyone gets a vague, ominous reading this time of year. It's part of the show. Then comes the stranger part of the feast, the exchange of offerings. Not gifts, exactly. More like trades in symbolism. Someone hands you a lump of beeswax. For light, they say. You nod and offer back a scrap of dyed wool, blue and rough. For warmth. These objects will be burned, buried, or hung in trees come spring, assuming spring ever arrives. There's a scholar's debate about these rituals, whether they stem from pagan customs or post-Roman invention. Some say they're echoes of druid ceremonies buried beneath centuries of ash and adaptation. Others argue they're just a practical way to keep people busy during the hardest weeks of the year. No one really knows. You doubt anyone here cares. The point isn't accuracy, it's endurance. Later in the evening, Caderen, the oldest man in the village, and the unofficial keeper of stories, stands up with the grace of a creaky cupboard and starts one of his long, winding tales. You've heard this one before, everyone has. It's the story of the fire thief, a boy who stole the last ember from the mountain spirits and carried it down in his mouth to keep his family alive. He lost his voice, burned his tongue, and was cursed never to speak again. But his family lived through the winter. The moral is simple. Fire is everything. Steal it if you must. Lose everything else but keep the flame. When Caderen finishes, everyone is quiet for a moment. Then someone claps, just once, The fire pops again, louder this time, as if it agrees. A few people laugh, the kind of laugh that sounds like it hurts coming out. You smile. You don't mean to, it just slips. Eventually people start to drift away one by one, cloaks pulled tight, heads down. You help put out the fire, carefully banking the coals to save for the morning, then step outside into the biting cold. Your cheeks sting, your breath puffs out like smoke signals. You make your way back home in the dark, footsteps muffled, eyes half-lidded with exhaustion and turnip fumes. Inside your hut, Tilda's curled up by the fire like a queen. You give her a scratch and collapse beside her. The last of the wood you collected is already burning low, casting thin orange light across the walls. You roll the bone the elder gave you across your palm. Crow bones, shadows crossing. Whatever that means, you'll deal with it later. For now, you have a warm cloak, a warm sheep, and a fire that's still breathing. It's not much of a feast, but it's something. You wake before the sun, but not because you planned to. It's the dream again. Something about standing in a dark wood, barefoot, watching flames flicker in the snow. You think you hear drums, or hooves, or your name being whispered in a language that hasn't been spoken in centuries. You shake it off, sit up slowly, and grope for your boots in the dark. Tilda grumbles and shifts against the wall, burrowing deeper into the straw. She doesn't dream, or if she does, she's smart enough not to remember. You feed the fire, crack your knuckles, and toss back the dregs to the broth you'd forgotten by the hearth. It's cold and gelatinous now, wobbly enough to be mildly insulting, but it's better than air. You step outside into the stillness. The snow is fresh, untouched. Everything's white and bent, like the whole world's been erased overnight and is still waiting for someone to rewrite it. Today is not about food or fire or even survival, not directly. Today, you're going to the Standing Stones. They sit half a mile west of the village, out past the scrubland and the frostbitten bushes, jutting from the earth like the ribs of something ancient. Every few weeks, when the moon hangs low and people start seeing things at the corners of their vision, a handful of villagers make the walk. Not for worship exactly, and not for answers either, just for acknowledgement. A nod to the old ways, to whatever gods might still be half awake under the ice. You wrap yourself tight, grab your walking stick and start the trek. The air tastes like iron, and the skies are a colourless smear. You pass the ruins of a Roman outbuilding, just a broken arch and a few mossy stones. There's still a bit of tile buried in the dirt, a scrap of mosaic that used to show a sea serpent, or maybe a ship. It's hard to tell now. The frost has claimed it like everything else. The standing stones loom ahead. 6 in total, crooked and uneven, encircling a patch of frozen earth that never quite collects snow. No one really knows why. Some say it's the wind, others think there's warmth in the ground. A few whisper about ley lines, though no one can explain what those are exactly. You're not alone when you arrive. A few others have gathered already. The healer, of course. Kadira is there, wrapped in so many layers he resembles a tree stump. A girl named Aline, who always walks barefoot no matter the weather, and a shepherd named Morris who speaks more to sheep than people. Everyone keeps a respectful distance, no greetings, no small talk. This isn't that kind of gathering. The healer steps forward and pours a bit of honey into the frozen dirt. Not much, just a drop or two, enough to be symbolic. It's the last of her stash, probably. Honey is rare now, she murmurs something under her breath. The words are too soft to hear, and in a language that may not even be hers. She told you once she learned it from her grandmother, who claimed it came from the hills, passed down from the days when gods still walked the land in human shape. Kadaern follows, laying a clump of dried herbs at the base of one of the stones. You recognise the smell. Sage. With a hint of rosemary. That means protection. Or maybe remembrance. You've heard both. Then it's your turn. You step into the circle, pull out a small bundle wrapped in cloth, and unwrap it slowly. Inside is a carved wooden charm etched with a crude sunburst. Your own handiwork, done late at night by firelight, more hopeful than skilled. You place it at the foot of the tallest stone and press your hand to the rough surface. The stone is cold, hard, but steady, older than memory. You close your eyes and whisper, "I want to see spring." There's a pause, a beat of stillness. Nothing happens, of course. The stone doesn't glow or hum or reply. But your breath doesn't freeze mid-sentence and your heart slows a little. That's enough. You step back into the circle and one by one everyone else does the same. Then the silence returns, deep and absolute. No one leads this ritual, no one claims authority. It's older than hierarchy, older than kings. And in this Brechtian Roman afterthought of a world, it's one of the few things that still feels stable, real. There's debate always about what these stones were for. Scholars from across the sea argue endlessly in musty halls. Burial markers, seasonal calendars, astronomical observatories. Maybe all of them, maybe none. Maybe they were meant to be confusing, to keep people humble. You walk back with Cadern, his footsteps crunching beside yours. He doesn't say much, just mutters about the bones being restless and the ground dreaming of green. You nod as if you understand, maybe you do. By the time you return to the village, the light is already fading again. You feel tired in a way that's different from chopping wood or hauling water. This is soul tired, ceremony tired. The kind of fatigue that comes from carrying your ancestors around all morning. You feed the fire. You check on Tilda. You rub warmth into your feet and boil a little water just to smell the steam. Later, while you're lying in bed, you think about the healer's honey, the sun charmer at the stone's base, the way the snow never quite settles inside that circle. You don't know if the gods heard you today, or if the stones even notice your existence, but you spoke, you gave something, you asked for spring, and that has to count for something. You wake in the middle of the night to a sound you'd hoped never to hear again. A howl, not a dog, not a drunken neighbour imitating a wolf for laughs. This sound is deeper, long, low and distant, but real enough to lift every hair on your body. It slides under the door like a cold draft and coils in your gut. You freeze, listening hard. Tilda shifts beside the fire, ears twitching. She heard it too. The fire's burned low, the coals pulsing in the dim room like tired eyes. You don't move at first. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe your ears are playing tricks on you. But then it comes again, closer this time. Another howl, this one echoing faintly off the frozen hills beyond the village. You curse under your breath and reach for your axe. It's not much, more tool than weapon, but it has weight. And the handle fits your grip like a promise. You toss a few dry bracken clumps onto the fire. The flames stir slowly, flickering just enough to throw a warm halo across the walls. You strap your cloak around your shoulders, whisper something to Tilda, stay be still, and step outside. The cold punches you square in the face. The sky is clear, stars blazing down with their indifferent ancient light. The moon's a sharp sliver, barely enough to see by, but you don't need much. You know your village by feel, and it's quiet, too quiet. You walk the perimeter slowly, boots crunching the top layer of ice. A few huts show signs of life, thin smoke rising from chimneys, candlelight bleeding through thatched seams. But most are dark, tucked away in silence. Families inside pretending they didn't hear the howl. Denial is a kind of warmth after all. You pass the goat pen, empty. You knew that already. The goats were slaughtered 2 weeks ago when the feed ran out. Still, the gate hangs open. That's new. You make a note to fix it. By the time you reach the old watch post, a half-collapsed tower from Roman times, now used mostly for drying herbs and swearing at crows, you hear it again, closer. This time it's not a howl. It's something heavier, deeper. A bark. Loud, sharp, and suddenly too close. Your breath catches. You back against the stone wall and scan the trees. You can't see anything, but you feel it. Movement, eyes. A presence watching from just beyond the reach of moonlight. Wolves are rare now, supposedly extinct in Britain, driven off or hunted into myth. But every few winters someone swears they saw one. A flash of grey fur. Tracks in the snow too big for dogs, a shadow in the woods that never looked away. You always assumed it was hunger-induced fantasy. Now you're not so sure. You wait there, pressed against stone until your fingers go numb. Nothing moves, nothing breaks the silence. Eventually, you turn back, stepping slowly, carefully, every sense on fire. When you finally return to your hut, your breath shaking in your lungs, Tilda is still there, wide-eyed but unharmed. You bar the door, feed the fire, and sit beside it like a guard. Sleep doesn't come easy. You nod off in fits, waking at every creak, every groan of the wind. But the howls don't return, the forest keeps its secrets. By morning, everything looks ordinary again. Snow on the roofs, ice along the path. Smoke curling lazily from hearths. But you can see it in people's eyes, tight with fear, glancing over shoulders. They heard it too. Later that day, you meet with a few others to check the village perimeter. You follow the tracks near the watchpost, prints in the snow broad and sharp, definitely not a dog. You all agree not to say wolf out loud, as if speaking it might summon more. Instead, you say stray or something big. It's a useless comfort, but it keeps the children from crying. That afternoon, you help reinforce a few doors. A small group decides to rotate night watch. You offer to take the first shift, mostly because you know you wouldn't sleep anyway. There's a theory passed around like old bread that wolves aren't just animals, not entirely. That in the deepest parts of winter, when hunger blurs the line between man and beast, something shifts. They say that in the darkest hours, the wild calls to the desperate, and some listen. You never gave it much credit before, but after last night you're not laughing anymore. The scholar types argue about it too, whether wolves survived longer in post-Roman Britain than official records claim. Some even suggest that the stories of wolves returning each winter were metaphors. For what, they never say. Maybe starvation, maybe fear itself. All you know is this: something was out there. That night, while the fire crackles and the snow falls soft and slow, you carve a charm from a bit of bone. Just something small, son, something to hang over the door. Not because you believe it'll keep the wolves away, but because you need to believe it might. Tilda sleeps beside you, her body warm and familiar. You rest your hand on her back and listen to her steady breathing, and outside the wind moans low through the trees, long and lonely, but empty of howls, for now. Still, you don't let your axe out of reach. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again. Your fingers look worse this morning. Not bad enough to panic over, no black tips, no bones showing, but they're swollen red and the skin has started to crack between the knuckles. You flex them slowly, wincing as the stinging starts. Chilblains? Probably. A few are raw enough to bleed. You lick your thumb and rub at the worst spots, but it's more of a reflex than a remedy. The cold doesn't just bite out here, it gnaws. Silent, slow, methodical, and eventually it gets inside you. You sit by the fire and stare at your hands, feeling older than you should. They're calloused and thick, but clumsy now. Gripping a knife has become a small act of faith. You wrap them in strips of wool, then old linen. You'll be slower today. That's fine. You're not in a rush to go anywhere, not after yesterday's howling. Still, you need help, so you visit the healer. Her hut smells like wet earth and scorched herbs. You duck under the low arch, immediately coughing as the smoke clings to your throat. She's crouched by her fire, grinding something in a wooden bowl. You never ask what it is, you've learnt that's not how this works. She gestures without looking. Sit. Hands. You hold them out, palms up. She doesn't wince, doesn't flinch, just nods and starts smearing a paste across the cracked skin. Pungent stuff that stings like betrayal. Smells like garlic, ash, and something vaguely medicinal. Grit your teeth and let her work. Could have been worse, she mutters. I've seen fingers come off like bark from a dead tree. Comforting, she wraps your hands in layers of wool soaked in warmed goose fat, then ties them with thin cords made from woven nettle fibres. They'll stay soft for a day, maybe two. You thank her with a strip of smoked fish, your last one, and promise to return the bowl when you're done with it. As you step back into the cold, hands bundled like misshapen loaves of bread, you wonder how long this can go on. Your body is holding out, but just barely. You've lost weight, more than you can afford. Your joints ache like an old tree groaning in the wind. You haven't felt truly warm in weeks. You remember vaguely that the Romans had baths, real ones, with hot water and steam. Public places where people soaked and laughed and didn't feel like brittle sticks about to snap. Some of the old ruins still have the pipes, the channels where heat once flowed like magic. You've run your fingers along the stone, cold now but smooth. Elegant. Some historians argue that bathing disappeared entirely during the Dark Ages, but you know better. People didn't forget how to clean themselves, they just couldn't waste fire on boiling water when there was nothing left to eat. You shuffle back home, arms full of twigs and dry grass you gathered on the way, more fuel, even if it burns fast. Your hands ache under the wrappings. Tilda snorts a greeting as you arrive, pacing a little, impatient. You feed her, pet her behind the ears, and breathe in the faint scent of lanolin and smoke that clings to her wool. She's the only thing in your life that still feels solid. You boil water, not for food this time, but to warm your hands. You dip them in slowly, cringing, and hold them there until the pain fades into a dull throb. The water turns slightly pink. You pretend not to notice. Later, you sit by the hearth, rolling your shoulders, stretching your legs, doing the same motions you do every day to keep the cold from settling in your bones like a curse. That's what the old woman called it once, frost spirit's curse. She said it starts in the feet, crawls up your legs, and by the time you feel it in your teeth, it's too late. You've seen it happen. A man's ear just fell off one morning. He didn't even feel fire. There's no hospital here, no doctors, just the healer, her bowls and a sharpened knife for when things go too far. If something goes wrong, if an infection takes hold, there's no second chance, there's no later. There's just a shallow grave near the edge of the trees, marked with a bundle of sticks and a prayer whispered into the wind. You're not there yet. You tell yourself that, over and over. Still, the fear creeps in around the edges. You find yourself checking your toes every morning, pinching your fingers, watching your skin like it might confess something. You've learned to recognize the early signs, discoloration, a numbness that doesn't go away, that weird dead cold feeling that seeps inward even when the fire's roaring. And here's the strange thing, some people don't fight it. When the pain gets bad, when their hands and feet are screaming, they stop. They lie down, curl up, let the numbness win. You've seen it. It's a quiet surrender, like sleep. Peaceful. But that's not your way. You're too stubborn, too angry. You've worked too hard for every bite of food, every ember you've ever lit. You're not going to freeze to death in your own hut with a sheep as your only witness. The fire crackles. The room warms. You lean back and close your eyes, letting the heat kiss your face. Your hands throb in their wrappings, pulsing in rhythm with your heartbeat. You imagine blood flowing again, healing, strength returning. It might be a lie, but tonight you let yourself believe it. Some say there are plants that help, things that grow under the snow, hidden in roots and bark. The healer sometimes talks about a flower that blooms in frost, said to pull the cold right out of your bones. No one's ever seen it, probably doesn't exist, but the story helps. It gives people something to look for when they're too cold to cry. You fall asleep with your hands wrapped in cloth, your boots propped near the fire, and your thoughts drifting between pain and peace. Outside, the night presses against the walls. Inside, the warmth holds. Barely, but it holds. The kids are louder today. You hear them before you even open your eyes. Shrieks of laughter, the unmistakable thump of something hitting snow, followed by a high-pitched theatrical scream. You groan softly, roll over and peek through the hide-covered gap in the door. Sure enough, a group of children are in the middle of the path, flinging snowballs and yelling nonsense, kicking up powder in every direction like a pack of tiny, rag-clad wolves. One of them, Mira, you think, is wearing a fur hat 3 sizes too big and wielding a crooked stick like it's a royal scepter. She's chasing 2 boys around the goat pen, giggling like someone who hasn't eaten broth 3 days in a row. You watch them for a moment, caught somewhere between baffled and impressed. You remember what it was like to be a kid in winter, barely. Mostly frostbitten fingers and someone yelling at you to stop chewing the firewood. But still, there were moments like this. Moments when snow wasn't an enemy, just something to shape into weapons and angels. You groan as you stand, your legs stiff and heavy. Your hands are still wrapped from yesterday, but the swelling has gone down a little. The paste must have worked, or at least numbed the worst of it. You stretch slowly, muscles creaking like old hinges, and glance at Tilda. She's asleep with her legs tucked under her, looking like a particularly judgmental hay bale. You toss her a frozen turnip. She doesn't move. You step outside, flinching as the cold clamps down on your face like a trap. The sun is out barely, a thin streak of gold across the treetops, just enough to make shadows. The kids stop when they see you, just for a second. Then one of them, a boy with 2 big boots and a snot cycle on his upper lip, grins and launches a snowball in your direction. It misses by a mile. You raise an eyebrow. He laughs and runs. You should be annoyed. You want to be annoyed. But instead, you find yourself trudging toward them, and before you know it, you've got a snowball in your hand. One solid, compact shot. You don't aim to hurt, just to remind them who invented the game. You lob it. It smacks Mira square in the chest. She freezes, dramatically gasps, then collapses backward into the snow with a howl. "He got me! I'm melting!" The others swarm you shrieking, and for a few frantic, dizzy minutes you're 12 again. Spinning, dodging, laughing, your sides hurt. Your nose runs, your hands ache, but the cold is forgotten. Everything is movement, breath, and the pure, wild magic of distraction. Eventually the kids collapse into a heap, breathing steam and grinning through chapped lips. You sit with them, knees tucked under your chin, your heart pounding. One of the boys starts building a snow fort. Another carves what might be a rabbit or a vaguely embarrassed rock out of a drift. Mira declares herself Queen of Winter and demands a sled made from a broken shield. Someone actually tries. You don't talk much. The kids chatter enough for all of you. Stories about a monster in the woods, a tree that grants wishes, a crow that talks in riddles. You don't correct them. You don't say those are just dreams. Because here, dreams are armour. If they believe the snow is enchanted, maybe it won't freeze their fingers off. Eventually, someone's mother calls from across the village, and the spell breaks. The kids scatter like birds, leaving only footprints and lopsided snow creatures behind. You stand slowly, brush snow off your cloak, and make your way back to your hut. Inside, Tilda's awake and annoyed that you left the door cracked. You toss her another turnip. She pretends not to see it. You sit by the fire and think about the children, about what they'll remember. You wonder how many of them will grow up and look back on these winters not as survival, but as play. As snow forts and imaginary monsters, you envy them. Or maybe you admire them, their ability to find joy in a season that's stolen so much. It's strange. Children don't just survive winter. Sometimes they seem to thrive in it. They're lighter, quicker, better at falling down and bouncing back up. Their clothes are always torn and their boots are mismatched, but they don't complain, they adapt. You've seen a boy wear the same single glove for an entire season, simply switching hands every few hours. And they're useful too. When it's not a game, kids haul water, collect kindling, sweep snow off thatch, patch holes with whatever scraps they find. They carry messages between huts. They watch over the sick. They carry wood and laughter, and small, fierce bursts of energy that keep the rest of you from falling into despair. You remember your own childhood in a winter like this one. Your father carving whistles from reeds to distract you. Your mother sewing rabbit pelts into the gloves, pricking her fingers raw. You didn't know how poor you were. You just knew you had a warm spot by the fire, and someone to sing to you when the wind howled too loud. There's an old saying, a village that keeps its children warm will never go cold itself. You're not sure that's true, but you like how it sounds. The fire pops. You add a branch, then another. Ilda shuffles closer. You pull your coat tighter and think not about yourself, but about Mira and the others. What will they be next winter? Bigger? Hungrier? Wiser? There's debate always about how children were treated in post-Roman Britain. Some say they were viewed as miniature adults, forced into labour and hardship as soon as they could stand. Others argue that children were treasured, protected, even in poverty. The truth is probably both. Kids work, but they also laugh. They're tools and treasures, just like fire. Just like food, you lie down near the hearth, your hand still wrapped, your cheek still pink from snowball war. Outside, the snow glows pale under the thinning moonlight. Inside, you sleep with a smile on your face, because for a little while today, the cold lost. You smell the betrayal before you see it. Rot, sour and unmistakable, curling out from under the floorboards like a whispered insult. You know that smell. It's the scent of spring, pretending it's on its way. Not actual spring, the kind with flowers and warmth and bees bumping into things, but fake spring. The cruel trickster that shows up in late February or early March warms the air just enough to melt the snow and then ruins everything. You open the door and step outside, and sure enough, the snow is softer underfoot, heavy and wet. The icicles have started dripping like they're weeping. Puddles form in the divots in the path, dirty and glinting in the grey daylight. The wind doesn't stat quite as hard, and if you really stretch your ears, you can almost hear birds. Not singing, just stirring. Fake spring always starts with a smell, the earth unfreezing, mould waking up, dampness crawling back into things. It smells like damp hay, old socks, and the bottom of a forgotten bucket. You wrinkle your nose and get to work. First order of business, inventory, again. You pull up the floor hatch to your food cache, and the smell doubles in strength. One of the root baskets is leaking. You poke it with a stick. The potatoes have turned to soup. A yellowish, putrid ooze seeps through the straw. You gag, slam the lid shut, and sit back, coughing into your sleeve. So much for that. You do the math in your head. 3 good roots left. Maybe 4 handfuls of grain. A few chunks of dried meat tougher than shoe leather. That'll last you another week if you ration hard and don't sneeze too close to the last oat sack. You're not alone in this. All over the village, people are digging into their last reserves, hoping to find one more smoked fish or a forgotten jar of dried greens. Most find disappointment. Fake spring doesn't just melt the snow, it melts illusions, it makes you look. And that's where the real danger starts, not in the frost but in the thaw. You wander out to the community smokehouse just in case. It's empty, of course, you knew it would be. Still you poke around, hoping someone forgot a slab tucked in the rafters. Nothing but cobwebs and the smell of old peat smoke. Outside, people move slowly like they're walking through water. There's no joy in this warmer air, just tension. Everyone's looking at each other differently now, measuring. Who's still got food? Who doesn't? Who's coughing too much? Who's starting to walk with that hollow, floaty look in their eyes? You pass Cadean, who sits in the sun like a dried apple, eyes closed, lips moving silently. You hear the word mud more than once. That's how you know it's really almost over. The return of mud. Snow's prettier, easier even. Mud is a slow, sinking death. It gets in everything. That afternoon, someone knocks at your door. It's Era, clutching her cloak tight, looking thinner than you remember. She asks if you've got any turnip left. You lie. You say you ran out 2 days ago. She nods and doesn't press. She probably lied too. There's an old song, barely remembers dear, about March being the hungry god, the one who lures you with sun and then demands your strength as sacrifice. A cruel joke of a month. And the worst part? It feels like hope. Just enough warmth to confuse your body. Just enough light to make you believe you're safe. But there's still frost under the dirt. Still sickness hiding in puddles. Still snow hiding in the hills. You help patch your neighbour's roof later. The snowmelt is leaking straight onto their sleeping mat. You trade the favour for a spoon of crushed barley. You chew it slowly, savouring every gritty grain like it's gold dust. Your neighbour looks at you with sunken eyes. Neither of you says thank you. You just nod. That's all there is now, nodding and hoping no one dies tonight. You sleep that night with your boots on. The floor is damp and you don't trust it. The wind outside is softer but still restless. You dream of warm soil and green shoots breaking through frost. Of butter. Of clean water. Of waking up without your hands aching. When you wake, you think you smell flowers. You don't. It's just the rot again. Teasing you. People debate whether this part of winter is technically still winter. Is it early spring? Is it late frost? Does it matter? Some say the real danger was always this. Not the darkness, not the deep freeze, but the hope, the fake promise, the lie in the air. You believe them now, still you drag yourself up, you check your fire, you hug Tilda, you chew a slice of dried roots so slowly it nearly dissolves in your mouth before you swallow. And then you go outside and into the mud, into the not quite spring, and you keep going, because what else is there? The first body is found in the barn. It's a boy, 16 maybe, though the winter carved lines into his face that don't belong to children. His name was Bren, and he was quiet, but strong. You'd seen him last week helping his father repair a fence, fingers raw but determined. Now he's curled into a corner behind a stack of hay that isn't even hay anymore, just mouldy, matted straw. His eyes are closed, his mouth slightly open, like he might have been whispering something when he died. Maybe a prayer, maybe nothing. You're not the one who finds him, it's his sister. She screams, then doesn't stop for a long time. When you arrive, others are already there. No one speaks, they just stand around him, shoulders hunched, breath visible in the stale barn air. Someone finally covers him with a cloak. You step back, pressing your hand to your mouth. You don't cry, you don't flinch. But you feel something fracture quietly inside you. You knew this was coming, everyone did. This is the price of March. He didn't freeze to death, not directly. His father says he stopped eating days ago, gave his food to his younger siblings, said he wasn't hungry, said he'd be fine, said it was just a chill, and now he's in the barn, cold as the floorboards. Later you help carry him to the edge of the village. The burial ground is still frozen, so you lay him in the storage shed next to 2 others. One is an elder who slipped on the ice last month. The other, you're not sure, you never asked. Names start to get soft this time of year, fuzzy around the edges. The idea is to bury them when the ground thaws, but that might be weeks. For now, you wrap them tight in wool and hope the cold will keep them from turning. That's all you can do. Death doesn't stop for spring, it just changes outfits. You sit outside the shed afterward, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. The sky is too bright for grief and the wind has that false gentleness again. You want to scream. Instead, you just breathe. People shuffle past now and then, no one meets your eyes. The village is quieter today. There's no laughter from the children, no chopping from the woodpiles. Even the birds seem to have taken the day off. You hear one woman mutter to herself, "March eats the soft-hearted first." She's not wrong. You return to your hut in silence. Tilda is asleep, belly rising and falling in slow, steady rhythms. You sit beside her and place your hand on her side. Her warmth seeps into your skin like a blessing. You try to be grateful. The fire's almost out, so you feed it the last of the bracken you gathered. It flares up weakly, throwing pale light across the room. You don't have the energy to cook. You chew on a hunk of dried root and swallow it like a rock. It barely helps, but it keeps you from tipping over. You spend the afternoon making a list. Not on paper. You don't waste parchment on grief, just in your mind. Names of people who aren't here anymore. This winter alone, you've lost 6, no, 7. You think. You stop counting when your throat tightens. The strangest part? You're getting used to it. That scares you more than anything. There's debate always about mortality rates in these forgotten centuries. Some say winter took 20% of every village. Others insist it was less, or that people adapted better than we give them credit for. The truth is, numbers don't help when you're the one digging the graves. Statistics don't hold your hand when your neighbour collapses in the snow. You wonder what Bren dreamed about in that barn. If he thought of spring, of warmth, of his siblings growing older and stronger because of the food he didn't eat, or if he just wanted the pain to stop. You wonder what you'd do if you had nothing left to eat and 5 mouths depending on you. You don't like the answer. That night there's a quiet gathering in the longhouse. Not a funeral, not officially, just a few of you sitting in the warmest place left, passing a wooden cup filled with watered-down mead and silence. Someone hums, someone cries, you say nothing. Words aren't strong enough right now. Eventually Cadarin clears his throat and says, "He was brave." It's not enough, but it's true. You walk home under a sky smeared with stars. Your boots crunch over slush and the dead twigs. The frost has returned, biting at your face like it never left. You feel hollow, heavy, old. Inside, the fire's barely a flicker. You don't bother feeding it. You just curl up beside it next to Tilda and pull your cloak over your head. And in the dark, you whisper Bren's name once, just once. Then you wait for sleep. You don't hear the flood coming, you feel it. Through your boots, through the walls. Like a slow tremble rolling up from the earth's belly. A kind of groan. Almost. Not quite thunder, not quite wind, just pressure. Damp and mean. Then comes the sound. It starts low, like distant hooves galloping through mud. Then louder. Louder still. Until the noise crashes into your ears all at once. A wet, snarling roar. Water. Moving fast. Hungry. You're on your feet before your thoughts catch up. You throw the door open and the wind slaps you, carrying mist and the heavy stink of churned earth. The snowmelt's finally snapped loose from the hills, and now the river that runs through the edge of the village, normally a sleepy trickle you can jump over in a single bound, has become something else entirely. It's a wall of water thick with ice and debris, surging through trees and fields like it's late for a war. You can already hear the shouting, people screaming names, doors slamming, wood breaking. You don't even bother pulling on your coat, you grab your boots, your axe and bolt. Outside, the village is a mess of motion. The water's already breached the southern edge. You see it licking at the foundations of Elric's hut, then sweeping his front fence away like it was made of straw. Livestock pens are gone. A few goats, those that hadn't been eaten yet, scramble for high ground, eyes wide and white. You slosh toward the centre of the village, ankle deep already, water climbing fast. Tilda is safe for now, inside the hut on higher ground. You made sure to build away from the river, a stroke of accidental genius. But others weren't so lucky. You see Cadairn limping across the path, shoulders hunched, soaked to the bone. You grab his arm and help him up the incline toward the smokehouse hill. He mutters, "Knew it. The river was too quiet." You don't have time to ask what he means. You spend the next hour in a daze, tying down roofs, pulling people out of knee-deep muck, yelling over the roar. It's not just water, it's ice. Huge sheets of it dislodged from the riverbanks, crunching through fences like glass through twine. You see one slam into the base of a hut and shear off half the wall. You think you hear someone inside. You wade in without hesitation, teeth chattering. The water's up to your waist now, thick with leaves and mud. Inside the hut, it's dark and slanted. A child is wedged beneath a beam, crying, half submerged. You grit your teeth and hoist the beam just enough to pull him free. He clings to you, silent now, shock hollowing his face. You haul him to safety and hand him off to a neighbour without saying a word. This isn't about heroics. It's about not drowning. Eventually the water slows, not stops, just slows. It spreads, fat and heavy, across the valley floor, pulling itself into wide puddles and shallow lakes. Like it's resting, like it's proud, and what it leaves behind is worse. The mud is knee-deep. The snow's gone, but everything else is ruined. Firewood, grain stores, dried goods, all soaked, ruined. Several huts are half collapsed. Fences lie like corpses. The smokehouse's back wall is caved in. You find your own hut mostly intact, though the lower wall has taken a beating. You brace it with stones, then go inside and find Tilda curled up in the driest corner, staring at the door like she knew you'd make it back. You sit beside her, soaked to the skin, and laugh once, just once, because if you don't, you'll scream. That night no one really sleeps. Too much wet, too much cold, too many missing. 3 people are unaccounted for. You help search until your legs stop working. You dig through muck with a broken fence post, hands blistering through the wrappings. You find one of them, a woman from the far edge, pinned under a collapsed beam. No breath, no warmth. Her fingers still clutching a rope that used to be tied to her child. You don't ask where the child is, you just dig. Eventually the storm passes. The sky clears like nothing happened. The stars even come out. They're beautiful, you hate them. In the following days the water recedes. Slowly, grudgingly, but what it leaves behind is ruin. The roots that survived the winter? Moulded. Firewood? Useless. Grain sacks, sprouting with damp. You try to salvage what you can, but most of it turns to sludge in your hands. And here's the insult. The snow's all gone now. Just like that. No more drifts, no more icicles, just mud, and more mud, thick enough to pull your boots off mid-step and swallow tools whole. There's a running theory that early spring floods like this were part of why settlements shifted to higher ground after the Roman withdrawal. Flood patterns changed, maintenance stopped, bridges collapsed, roads became rivers, and people had to adapt or drown. You believe it now. You spend your time drying what can be dried, reinforcing walls with whatever hasn't floated away. The healer boils herbs to fight off lung rot from all the cold water exposure. You already feel it scratching at the edge of your chest. People start talking about leaving, about walking east, maybe south, toward the coast, but no one actually moves. There's nowhere to go. This land is ruined, but it's your ruin, and the idea of travel with half a meal and a wet blanket is suicidal. You fall asleep next to Tilda that night. Your cloak still damp, your back set sore from lifting too many fallen timbers. Outside the stars keep shining. Inside the fire's too small, but it's something. And as you drift off, you whisper, "We didn't freeze, we didn't drown. That'll have to go for now." The day after the flood feels like a bad hangover. Not from drink. There's been no mead for weeks, but from adrenaline, terror, and the kind of frantic movement your body regrets the next morning. Every joint complains. Every bruise has a voice. And the village is too quiet again, the way it always is after something tries to kill you and half succeeds. You start the morning by walking the perimeter of your hut, checking the walls, pressing your palm into each one like you're feeling for a pulse. The lower corners soaked through, but it held. The fire survived too, barely, though you had to feed it half a stool leg to keep it going last night. Worth it. Warmth is the only thing that still feels like control. Tilda's surprisingly chipper today, nudging your knee like it's feeding time, which it is, but what you give her isn't much. A few sprigs of dried nettle, some mouldy grain you shook the worst of the fuzz off. She snorts at it. You glare. "We're all suffering here, Your Highness." Outside, the muck is somehow worse than yesterday. The snow's gone, but now the earth is soft and bitter, a thick soup of mud, melted ice, and disappointment. You step in it and feel the sucking sound echo up into your soul. You walk carefully, slowly. You've already seen 2 people fall in, one to the knees, another who lost a boot so deep you joked it went to the underworld. They didn't laugh. But you're not out here for entertainment. You're listening, because this is when the whispers start. Every spring, every fake spring, there comes a moment when the village stops grieving and starts scheming. People start to trade again. barter, plan. And more importantly, they start to talk. You hear it first from old Nia, the basket weaver, who always smells like burnt straw. She leans over her fire and mutters, "I heard the folk near the valley found a stash, real flour, buried deep in a pit under the old orchard." You raise an eyebrow. That orchard hasn't produced anything but thorn bushes in years. Then it's Cairdairn. A man passed through last spring, said there are growing greens down south already, swore on his life, might be worth going that way. You ask him what happened to the man. He says nothing, just shrugs. But the best source of all is the Whisper Network. You know what it is, even if no one calls it that. It's the invisible threads between neighbours, the slow exchange of secrets in shared work and quiet corners, the girls who pass firewood and gossip in equal measure, the kids who eavesdrop on their parents and pass the details off in exchange for a strip of dried bark to chew. It's not organised. It's not reliable, but it's powerful, and it starts buzzing now after winter's worst is over, but before spring has the guts to commit. You hear about a woman 2 villages east who's been making candles from rendered fish fat and bartering them for salt. You hear that someone dug up a Roman coin and is using it to trade for eggs, pretending it's magic. You hear that one man has a bow, a working one, and claims he saw deer prints near the hill pass. That one gets your attention. A deer? In March? It's like saying you saw an angel looting your garden. No one believes it, but no one dismisses it either. You tuck it away for later. Maybe. Back in the village centre, people are beginning to repair. The thatchers tying new bundles with muddy fingers. The woodcutters salvaging any planks that didn't float away. You join a group hauling stones to rebuild the storage hut, because if you don't help, you don't get a space in it. That's how it works. Contribution equals survival. While you stack stones, a younger boy, maybe 10, maybe 12, they blur together now, sidles up beside you and whispers, "The healer says the roots in the northern wood are waking up, says she saw a crocus." You stop mid-lift. "That true?" He shrugs. "She said it with her not lying face." Then he runs off, feet splashing, boots probably stolen from someone's dead uncle. A crocus. A flower. You try not to hope, but you mark it in your mind. That same stretch of wood has garlic bulbs, burdock, dandelion greens, not food exactly, but things you can boil, things you can trade. You decide you'll head there tomorrow, maybe drag someone with you, maybe not. That afternoon, the healer herself stops by your hut. She's checking everyone for signs of rot, infection, plague, whatever disease might be trying to sneak in now that the cold's loosened its grip. You show her your hands, the skin's healing, still red, still angry, but intact. She nods and pokes at your shoulders with surprising force. "You're holding too much tension," she says. "No kidding." She squints. "You dreaming again?" You nod. "Woods, fire, sometimes ice, sometimes wolves." She grunts. "That's all normal." You raise an eyebrow. "It is?" "In spring, yes." She leaves you with a jar of stinking salve and a warning not to eat any mushrooms until she says otherwise. You promise, probably a lie. As night falls, the temperature drops again. One last slap from winter. Like it wants to remind you who's still in charge, you bank the fire, tuck Tilda under a pile of old cloaks, and sit beside the hearth with your thoughts. The Whisper Network is alive now. People are talking again, planning. The air smells like thawed manure and possibility. And somewhere out in the hills, if the whispers are right, a deer is still alive. You close your eyes and picture green, just for a moment. The soup has crossed a line. This morning you stare into your pot like it insulted your mother. The smell is complicated, woodsy, a little sour, maybe even a little fishy, though no fish went into it. You poke the contents with a stick, as if the act of stirring will change the reality. This is a bark and bone broth. Literally. A boiled mix of twigs, a scrap of skin from a long-gone rabbit, and what might be part of an old boot lining. There's also a fistful of boiled nettles in there. But you're not sure if they help or make it worse. Tilda eyes it, and for the first time in weeks, she doesn't want to eat it. That's a bad sign. She usually inhales anything with even a hint of flavour. You dip your spoon in, bring it to your lips, and take the smallest sip imaginable. It's awful. And you drink it anyway. Because this is late winter, also known as the season of desperation. No one calls it that out loud, but everyone's feeling it. People have started experimenting with things they once swore they'd never touch. Tree bark, dried lichen, boiled leather, powdered bone scraped from long clean carcasses, You've even heard talk of roasting mice. Quiet talk, whispered like shame behind cold doors. You don't judge, you can't. You're on your third bark stew this week. You remember the first time you saw someone boil bones twice. It seemed odd, like squeezing water from a stone. Now you're the one doing it, scraping, cracking, prying out anything soft enough to chew or melt into broth, even if it gives you splinters in your teeth. There's a saying Caden used to mumble, "In March, you eat memories." At first, you thought it was poetic nonsense, but now it makes sense. Every meal is a memory of something that used to be food. That root you found used to be a carrot. That broth used to be meat. That brittle strip of fur used to be your hat lining, but now it's breakfast. You visit the storage hut again. Just in case, it's even emptier than last time. A few shriveled apples that resemble dried ears. One cracked pot with fermented grain that smells like foot sweat and vinegar. A single lump of something grey that might be cheese. No one claims it. You don't touch it. Yet. You trade with Mira's mother, 2 lengths of woven nettle string in exchange for a small onion, wrinkled but whole. You almost cry when you bite into it raw, the burn, the flavour. It feels like something real. You stash half to boil later. The other half you savour like it's a feast. In the woods, the foragers report that wild greens are close, buds are forming, but they're not edible yet. Too bitter, too tough. If you eat them now, you'll be sick. That's the cruel joke of the season. Everything is almost alive. The ground is almost soft. The buds are almost ready. Your food stores are almost gone. In a few weeks there will be dandelions, young garlic, tender leaves. But now there's bark soup. There's a fringe method some folks have started using, boiling pine needles. Not for food really, but for the illusion of it. The broth is tangy, bitter, but supposedly keeps scurvy away. You've tried it once. It tasted like disappointment. You might try it again tomorrow. You sit with a few neighbours around a tiny fire in the community space. Everyone holds a bowl and no one asks what's in each other's. You see one woman stirring a broth with tiny white things floating in it. You don't ask. You don't want to know if it's snail eggs or just weird peas. Instead, you talk about the weather. Always the weather. "The sky was red this morning," someone says. "Means wind," another replies. "Or sun," someone adds helpfully. Caden grunts from the corner. "Means the earth's still bleeding out winter." No one argues. You glance around at the faces. They're thinner now, paler, but not lifeless. People still have energy to speak, to joke, to breathe. That's something. There's debate, as always, about how much of this was normal. Some scholars think people ate well in the early medieval period, that they had access to wild food, clever preservation, and communal support. Others say no. Famine was constant, especially in bad winters. Maybe it depends on where you lived. Maybe it depends on how well you could lie to yourself with a pot of soup that smells like tree bark and regret. At home, you boil your onion half with nettle, old bones, and a few slices of dried mushroom you found under a log. The soup is better this time. Not good, but edible. You share a bit with Tilda, who slurps it like a queen, then curls up against the hearth. You sit by the fire, slurping from your bowl, holding it like it might run away. You close your eyes and imagine a roasted chicken. Skin crackling, steam rising from bread, honey on your fingertips. You can almost taste it. You chew your bark soup and call it chicken. It helps a little. You fall asleep that night dreaming of wild greens, of fat rabbits and salt, of spring rains that wash the hunger away. And in the back of your mind, a small voice says, "You're almost there." Almost. It starts with a drip. One soft, slow patter. Somewhere above your head. You crack open one eye, groggy. Your cheek still pressed to the edge of your cloak. Drip. There it is again. You sit up slowly. Your bones ache, but not with cold this time, just stiffness. The kind that comes from sleeping too long in the same curled position, like a root around a rock. You glance toward the roof and spot it. A thin trickle of water creeping down the inside of the wall and landing with a tiny splat in the dirt beside your fire. You've seen it before, but not like this. Not with that smell, earthy, sharp, alive. Not with a light that filters through the cracks in the thatch, warm and golden real. You step outside and blink. Everything's different. The sky's blue. Not grey blue or winter blue, but true blue, the colour of old paintings and summer stories. The air smells like turned soil and wet bark. The snow is gone, all of it. Not even slush remains, just damp patches in the mud. And the mud itself is soft and dark, clinging to your boots like a promise. You feel it before you see it. Warmth. The sun is touching your skin. You stand there in the centre of it, arms limp at your sides, lips parted, like a priest witnessing a miracle. After everything, after the hunger and the floods and the howling and the rot, you are standing in full sunlight. You lift your hands and squint up at the sky, half expecting the clouds to slam shut like a trapdoor, but they don't. The thaw has arrived, not a trickle, not a tease, a true thaw. The trees are still bare, but their branches are slick with moisture, dripping like old men shaking off a long bath. Patches of green dot the ground, small but stubborn, little shoots pushing up through the muck, heads bowed like monks rising in prayer. Around the village the mood has shifted. Not joy, not yet, but movement. People are doing things again, mending fences, clearing debris, airing out blankets that smell like 6 months of smoke. Kids chase each other barefoot through the mud, slipping, falling, shrieking. Someone's already started digging a garden bed, though the soil's still half frozen 3 inches down. You take your walking stick and head toward the northern edge of the woods, the place the whisper network said was stirring. And for once, the rumours were right. The ground is soft underfoot, covered in last year's leaves and this year's promise. You find the crocus first, just like the healer said. A single brave petal, violet and ridiculous, blooming in a patch of moss. You kneel in front of it, not touching, just watching. It doesn't know what it survived. It doesn't need to. Further in, you spot green shoots, garlic, dandelion, wild mustard. Not food yet, but close. A few more warm days and you'll be able to harvest enough to flavour broth, to trade, to hope. You dig around gently with your hands, fingers black with mud, and pull up a small clump of chickweed. It smells like grass and sharp water. You tuck it into your satchel like treasure. When you return to the village, everyone's smiling. Not big smiles, not festival grins, but small ones, cautious, earned. One man offers you a smoked mouse on a stick. You're not sure if it's a joke or dinner. You thank him either way. Cadern waves you over and points toward the South Hills. Saw geese this morning, he says, real ones, flying north. You feel a chill, not from cold, but something deeper, because if geese are flying north, that means it's over. The deep freeze, the hunger moon, the season of dying. You survived. Not everyone did. You still see the empty huts, the broken fences that'll never be rebuilt. There are fewer voices in the village now, fewer fires burning, but the ones that remain are stronger, sharper, ready. There's a kind of ritual that happens now, one no one talks about directly. Everyone who made it through walks the boundary of the village at some point, alone, slowly, just to see it, just to confirm it's still there, and so are you. You do yours that evening, walking the paths you once dug through snow, now muddied, but open. You pass the fields, the animal pens, the ruins of the smokehouse. You touch each gatepost, each tree, like saying hello again after a long absence. By the time you return to your hut, the sun is setting in gold and crimson, lighting the sky like fire behind a veil. You sit with Tilda outside, back against the wall, and breathe in the spring air. She bleats once and stretches. Even she seems lighter. There's a scholarly theory that this exact moment, the thaw, the sudden return of green, was the root of half the festivals in early Britain. That before the Romans, before the Saxons, before language turned myth into story, there was just this, a warm breeze, a single bloom, and the first real food in months. And people didn't just celebrate it, they worshipped it. You understand that now. Inside you boil your chickweed with the last of your dried root. It's a thin soup, but the taste is new, fresh. You can't stop sipping it. You think about tomorrow, about foraging, rebuilding, planting. You're tired, but not hopeless, for the first time in what feels like years. The future doesn't feel like a threat. You fall asleep with your door open, letting the warm air drift in. No wolves howl, no wind moans, just the soft, sleepy rustle of a world beginning again. You survived the brutal winter. Now you live. The first true meal of spring isn't planned. It just happens. You're outside before sunrise, like half the village, poking through the wet fields with numb fingers and a woven basket that still smells like smoke. The earth is tender now, like a sab just starting to peel, and it gives a little when you dig. That's what you want. Give, looseness, signs of life beneath the surface. You crouch near the alder trees at the eastern edge of the woods, where the soil's always a bit warmer, and there it is, burdock. You let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a cough, the roots small, scraggly, but whole. You dig carefully, pull it free, knock off the clumps of wet soil and tuck it into your basket like a relic. Next comes sorrel, bright green, sharp-smelling, shaped like little hearts. Then dandelion leaves, bitter, but packed with more nutrition than anything you've eaten in months. Then a flash of movement. Rabbit. Too fast for you to catch, but you mark the trail, next time maybe. You gather mushrooms from a fallen log, the good kind, firm and white, not the soft, spongy ones that melt in your mouth like regret. You test one between your fingers, then sniff. The healer showed you the difference long ago. She said, "If it smells like bread, it won't kill you." Helpful. By mid-morning, your basket's half full, not a feast, but enough to call one. Back at the village, others are returning too. Mira's mother has a string of wild onions. Cadeon's got a bird. He won't say how he caught it. Just grins and mutters something about dumb luck and clever twine. Even the healers brought a jar of pickled something from deep in her stores. No one asks how old it is. There's a quiet energy spreading, a buzz, a ripple, like someone just remembered what celebration feels like. No one says the word out loud, but it's there. Feast. Or at least a version of it, so people start building. The old fire pit near the longhouse is cleared of debris. Someone finds dry wood, a miracle by itself, and soon smoke rises into the sky again. Not the bitter, desperate kind from winter, but clean and fragrant. The smell draws others. You hear singing, actual singing. A child starts banging sticks together in rhythm. It's terrible. It's perfect. You slice your burdock into coins, scrub the greens, and drop them into a shared pot. The water hisses when it hits the hot stones at the bottom. Soon it's bubbling, full of colour and steam. You add the mushrooms. Someone else tosses in wild chives. Another offers a hunk of smoked something that's probably squirrel. This is how it used to be, before the world froze over. Everyone bringing what little they had, combining it, making something more out of the pieces. Food and fire and shared warmth. Ancient medicine for ancient wounds. As the sun reaches its peak, the pot is ready. You eat from wooden bowls with wooden spoons, sitting in the sick grass on the damp cloaks and the mended blankets. The soup is sharp, green, sour with sorrel and rich with burdock. It makes your jaw ache, but in a good way, like chewing life back into your teeth. You glance around the circle. There's Mira, now wearing a garland of actual flowers she must have stolen from the healer's garden. Cadeon is arguing about whether this is the warmest spring he's ever felt or the second warmest. Tilda is sprawled in a sunny patch, belly bloated from onion scraps. You feel full, not just in your stomach but in your chest, your throat, your hands. You don't say much because there's nothing to say. You're here, you're eating You didn't die. That's enough. Later in the afternoon, the healer tells a story, one you've heard before, but everyone leans in anyway. It's about a girl who wandered into the forest during a late winter and found Spring asleep in a cave. She whispered a song until Spring woke up yawning and stretched her arms across the world. You know it's not real, but you also know it is. There's some debate, always, about how often these kinds of spring celebrations happened. Some historians argue that early Britons only marked religious festivals tied to solstices and equinoxes. Others claim every thaw was a reason to gather. That even without formal holidays, people knew when to rejoice. After all, if you've made it through the dead season, why wouldn't you throw a party? Your fire burns lower as the shadows stretch. The children have started a game with stones and rules no one understands. The food is gone, the pot is scraped clean. A dog, no one knows whose, runs in lazy circles around the gathering, tail wagging like it knows something you don't. You close your eyes for a moment, leaning back on your elbows, letting the sun warm your face. It's not hot, not yet, but it's consistent, stebisari. You don't have to huddle anymore, you can rest, and as you lie there, letting the sounds of laughter and wind and crackling fire wash over you, you realise something surprising. You're not just surviving anymore, you're living, slowly, cautiously, but undeniably. There's still work ahead. Crops to plant, tools to repair, roads to clear, but today isn't about that. Today is about soup and sunlight and stories. Today is about showing winter that it didn't win. You sit up again, watch the smoke rise into the brightening sky, and whisper a quiet thank you to the healer, to the trees, to the sun, and to your own stubborn breath. Then you stand, stretch your arms, and start helping clean the bowls, because tomorrow's coming, and you'll be ready. You don't even notice the first flower bloom until your foot nearly crushes it. You stop mid-step, wobbling, and look down at the little thing, pale yellow, trembling in the breeze, tucked between two stones like it is hiding from being noticed. A primrose, you crouch down slowly, touch it with a finger. It bends, bows politely, then stands back up again. Resilient as anything you've seen all winter. It's strange how much that single flower does to you. You feel it in your chest, in your spine, in the back of your throat where the tears used to live during the hardest nights. You don't cry, not exactly, but your breath catches. You're not sure if it's relief or awe, or just the sheer disbelief that something so soft could come out of the same ground that buried your neighbours only weeks ago. Spring isn't subtle anymore. It's not whispering or teasing, it's shouting now, in colour and heat and motion. Birds have returned in full force, bickering in the trees, flitting from branch to branch like they own the place. Bugs buzz around in lazy, drunken loops. Even the air feels thicker, not with smoke or rot, but with possibility. With pollen, with life. The village has transformed. Where there were skeletal fences, there are now bundles of reeds and bark being woven into new ones. Where roofs sagged under snow, fresh thatch is being laid in clean rows. The healer is organising a new herb bed, muttering about rotations and drainage. Children are digging in the dirt, not out of boredom, but because they want to grow things. Seeds are being traded like coin. A single pea can now fetch a tool handle. Beans are worth more than iron. You're out in the field, breaking up the earth with a borrowed hoe, muscles screaming from the effort, but your mouth curled into the beginning of a smile. The soil is damp but giving, black and rich. Worms wriggle out of your path like exclamation marks. You haven't planted anything yet, but just working the land feels like a kind of promise. Cadern ambles by with a wheelbarrow full of compost that smells like the devil's bathwater. "The good stuff," he says, grinning. "Gonna make the turnips sing." So you gag theatrically, and he cackles as he keeps moving. You swear he's actually gaining weight now. His cheeks are less sunken. His eyes less glassy. He's still a walking fire hazard with a beard like wild moss, but he's back. So are you. Later that day, you help raise a fence post with 3 others, hands blistering, wood creaking. It's rough work, but there's no frostbite to fight. No bone-deep chill, just the usual aches and grunts of labour. You miss none of the cold. In the evening, there's another gathering. This one less spontaneous, more deliberate. An actual festival. Or at least the closest thing your little muddy village can manage. A circle of stones is cleared. Torches are lit. Someone drums on the bottom of a broken bucket. The kids dance like goblins. A girl sings a song you haven't heard since you were a child, about green men and laughing rivers and animals that talk in riddles. The healer passes around a bowl of spring tonic, some awful brew of greens and vinegar and mysterious things she claims are cleansing. It tastes like swamp. You drink it anyway. Everyone does. It's tradition now. If you've lived this long, you might as well drink the swamp. There's a moment, just one, when someone suggests a blessing, an offering. Not to the old gods exactly, and not to the new ones either, but to life, to the turning of the year. So someone finds a stone and another sets a sprig of chickweed on it, and a third lays a boiled egg. Likely from a hen that only just remembered how to lay after months of silence. You all stand in a circle, eyes closed. It's quiet. Not reverent exactly, but respectful, like you're acknowledging something bigger. Not a god maybe, but a pattern. A cycle. The thing that keeps the sun rising and the earth thawing and the blood pumping through your stubborn frostbitten heart. And when it's done, you eat. Not bark soup this time. Real food. Greens and mushrooms and fish someone pulled from the still-chilled stream. Even bread. Actual bread. From the barley someone saved all winter. It's flat and gritty and beautiful. You chew slowly, letting every bite remind you that you're alive. There's debate, always among scholars and archaeologists, about the seasonal rhythms of early medieval Britain. Some say communities celebrated the equinoxes, aligning their planting to the sun. Others think those ideas came later, or were borrowed, or mixed in from other cultures. But honestly, you don't care what the historians say, because here, in this moment, you know it matters. The turn of the season, the first flower. The soup that doesn't taste like desperation, the laughter that comes without apology. This is older than books, older than kings. This is survival celebrated. You end the night sitting by your fire with Tilda, watching the sparks climb into the night sky. The stars are clear now, not hidden by smoke or storm. The moon is a sickle, sharp and watchful, and for the first time in months you feel safe enough to take off your boots before you sleep. Tomorrow the real work begins, ploughing, planting, mending, storing. But tonight is a punctuation mark. A full stop after a long, grim sentence. The end of the season of loss. You lie back on your mat, arms behind your head, and close your eyes. You made it. And now, finally, you get to live again. So here you are, at the tail end of the season you didn't think you'd survive. Still standing, still breathing, and somehow a little bit stronger than when it began. Your hands are rougher, your boots more patched, your stomach maybe a little flatter, but your fire is warm, your sheep is fed, your garden is waking, and your village, though scarred, still hums with life. You lean against the doorframe of your hut one last time, watching the sun stretch longer across the field each day. The soil smells rich again, the birds sound like they mean it, and the trees are starting to whisper in leaves instead of bare branches. Even the wind has changed its tone. It no longer cuts. It carries. Inside, Tilda snores. Outside, someone laughs. You don't forget the hunger, or the cold, or the silence that filled the sky when it was too cold even for wolves. But now, you have stories to tell, you have soup to make that won't turn your face inside out. You have work to do, real work, living work. The kind that smells like dirt under your nails and not like smoke in your lungs. And most of all, you have time again. Time to walk, to plant, to sleep without one eye open. Spring has arrived. Not like a storm, not like a promise, but like a well-earned breath. You take that breath now. Slow, deep, grateful. And for the first time in a long, long while, you let yourself imagine next winter. Not with fear, but with understanding. Because now you know how to make it through.